Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Chambers. This is our first in-person meeting for like 17 months, so it's good to be back in Chambers and to be able to see everyone again. This is some technical difficulties, so we'll figure that out. Joining me in council is Councillor Loy, Councillor Plechko, Councillor Matties, and Councillor Laurie. Councillor Meyer is joining via Microsoft Teams. Councillor Meyer, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. You guys can hear me all right?
Yes, Councillor Meyer. So we can't see you, so we're just gonna, when we go for the vote, I'll ask you for a verbal vote. Is that correct?
I earlier worked out I can raise my hand in the Teams function if you can see me. I will do it now.
Okay, I can't see you, but does no, staff are nodding their head, so I'll just ask you for a verbal.
Okay.
Sounds good. So welcome back and good to see everyone. Before you members of council, there is agenda. Deputy Mayor Meyer, if we can ask you to make the motion to adopt the agenda, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I make the motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Okay. Thank you. Administration, anything to add? Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Meyer?
In favor.
Thank you. And that's passed 6. Okay, moving on to number 3 of our agenda, which is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents of Town Stony Plain to bring concerns and share thoughts with the Town Stony Plain and council with anything that's not on the current agenda. Has anybody been registered to come speak? Okay. Thank you very much. We're joined by Heather. Is that correct? Please come join us. And Savannah? Hannah, sorry.
Do I stand or sit?
You can sit.
Okay.
Thank you. And welcome to Council Chambers, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. My name is Heather Murray, and I currently sit on the board for Spruce Grove Ringette. I've held that position on the board for 8 years. I'm here today advocating on behalf for all girls in sport, and in particular Ringette. To give a bit of history, at the beginning of the 2018-19 season, I attended a user group meeting here in Chambers and presented some startling numbers that showed how ice distribution in our tri-area has been based on history and not need. This leaves our female athletes severely lacking in the ice equity department. The numbers at that time were as follows. Stony Plain Minor Hockey had approximately 74 hours for a week between the Glen Hall and the TLC. Spruce Grove Ringette had about 36 hours per week. And our registration numbers were almost equal at about 300 registrants. Stony Plain Minor Hockey was told during that user group meeting that they would have to share some ice with us. And we were told that the town of Stony Plain wasn't prepared to do anything at that time because they were waiting on a centralized ice scheduler to take over for all of the ice in our communities. So we received 1 extra hour per week from Stony Plain Minor Hockey. Fast forward to this year, and there was no user group meetings held at all for the Glen Hall or the Tri or Stu Barnes. The schedules were emailed out. When we received the Glen Hall schedule, we were shorted the 1 extra hour that we were given by them. When this was brought to their attention, they fixed it, but they gave us a blank schedule only showing our spots. So we have no idea which user groups are getting which spots. The schedules for the Tri and Stu Barnes did show all of the user groups. So the numbers for this year look as follows. Spruce Grove Minor Hockey, or Stony Plain Minor Hockey, historically gets about 40 plus hours a week at the Glen Hall. And this year at the Tri, they have 29 hours. So that will be about over 70 hours for the week. Spruce Grove Ringette Association will only get about 40 hours. We lost all of our ice at Calahoo, as it's been given to 2 hockey associations, one being an academy, which only a few select can afford. So again, even though our registration numbers are most likely close to even, our weekly allotted ice is nowhere near even. In our 2018-19 season, 42% of our Spruce Grove Ringette athletes resided outside of the city of Spruce Grove, yet all of our ice is within the city of Spruce Grove. And we have to continually look outside of our county for extra ice when we have more than enough within the community that we pay taxes to. I personally went to a few council-attended events pre-COVID, to advocate for a centralized ice booker, and to show the disparity of ice allocation. I had many conversations about how ice allocation should be based on need and not history. Why is it up to Stony Plain Minor Hockey to decide how much ice that we should get? Every year, the registration numbers for every sport that uses any facility should be given to the city or the town. This is what you base your ice on, not on what has historically been done, and certainly not on gender. This model is used in St. Albert, and it works very well, and it's based solely on numbers. Spruce Grove Ringette Association also hosts one of the biggest tournaments the Tri-Area sees for any sport, the Sweetheart Tournament. 60-plus teams come to our community to take part in a 4-day tournament. They stay in our hotels, they eat at our restaurants, and they shop in our stores. And this is put on by our fantastic volunteer parents. These same parents ask our board every year why we can't get ice in our own community. It's 2021 and we no longer can ignore this huge disparity. How can you or I look at our female athletes and tell them that their sport matters a little less than a primarily male-based sport, even though we have the resources and the knowledge to do better? So thank you for your time. I have some little handouts. Am I allowed to hand them out?
If you just leave it there, we'll just have our staff come bring it to us. Thank you very much for your presentation and sharing that with us and the numbers.
For the people who aren't here. Sure. 5. How many is there? 6, 7. Thanks.
Thank you. You were mentioning numbers, and I missed it. When you said the 2021 hours, you said that Stony Plain Minor Hockey had 40 hours a week in Stony Plain and 29 at the Tri-Leisure Center.
Yeah.
But I missed what you said for Ringette. You said it was less, but I didn't get the numbers. Do you have them?
So for this year or for 2018-19?
2021.
For this year?
Yes.
So for this year, Spruce Grove Ringette, we have 2 hours at Glen Hall. We have 18.45 hours at the TLC. We have 18.5 hours at Stu Barnes for a total of 39.5 hours.
Okay. And do you have the numbers for Stony Plain Minor Hockey at Stu Barnes?
They don't get ice at Stu Barnes, but they have 29 hours at the TLC.
Okay.
And they get 40-plus hours at Glen Hall.
Thank you. And then you mentioned that since 2018, Stony Plain Minor Hockey gave you guys an hour, and then they took it back. Is that correct?
Yeah. But then they gave it back to us.
They gave it back to you.
But my point is, it's not up to them to give ice.
Right.
It's up to the town to give ice.
Thank you very much. Does staff have anything to say and comment on the allocation of ice and how we typically do it in terms of a review?
Your Worship, I guess just general comment without having the direct information in front of us. Certainly ice allocation tends to be, there's some give and take, as we heard just even in the presentation, multiple sites and so on and so forth. So, Your Worship, if Council so would like, we could probably do some review and provide some information at a later date, but a little bit difficult to go off the top of the head. I'll turn it over to our General Manager of Community and Protective Services if he has anything to comment on at this point.
Your Worship, members of councils, the CAO, correct, we could get you more information if needed. Typically, the ice allocation has been historical in Stony Plain, meaning for amount of time now, user group requires the same amount of ice or both sport field use. If they don't, then we reallocate that ice time or that sport field time back to other users. We were working on a regional ice allocation process. COVID-19 unfortunately paused that. Staff are getting back engaged with that regional ice allocation process, and we're hoping that's ready to go for not this ice season, unfortunately, but next ice season. So that we believe that will help with this particular process in terms of we have 5 ice surfaces in the region, and hopefully that will provide us a better global view of those 5 surfaces versus right now Spruce Grove looks at theirs, we look at ours, and the TLC looks at their facility. So with Stony Plain only having 1 facility, we certainly do have limited ice time compared to the city of Spruce Grove and the TLC. Historically, the TLC was purchased and built by our community to expand our overall ice to 3 surfaces for Stony Plain residents and 4 for Spruce Grove residents. Sometimes that's not looked upon by the particular users as their home facility, and that's something that perhaps a regional view from ice allocation will limit that viewpoint. So we are working towards that. As you guys know, ice allocation and ice facilities cost a lot of money to build and construct, and any way we can make the ice more effective and more efficient for users, certainly something we try to endeavor to do. And the city of Spruce Grove is looking to add ice surfaces in their community, which probably will increase our overall regional reach or deficit related to ice in our community. But certainly it doesn't help the specific ice usage in Stony Plain. We still will have one facility and still have the users that are specific to that facility. We don't currently have a policy that is based on gender percentage, and that would be something if council deemed we should look at, we could certainly do so.
And just maybe a question for administration, as mentioned by Heather, that in 2018 we were actually talking about an ice allocator, and then we had things happen, and then we had COVID, and that's kind of been paused. And you mentioned that it's getting back on track. Will it be on track? I don't know if we can do anything about this season, but will it be on track for next season?
Yes, Your Worship, that was the regional ice allocation that I briefly spoke about in terms of the staff are re-engaged in getting that back on track for not this ice season, but next ice season.
Okay. And then, I don't know if you have it on your top of your head, but I understand that we also tracked the amount of ice and facilities that are given back to the town if they're allocated. Do we have any historical data of how much ice was given back to the town of Stony Plain in terms of last-minute cancellations, sports fields, somebody not having a tournament, so that's canceled, so that we can actually have some historical data that says that they need this much ice or they don't need this much field time, etc.?
Your Worship, this evening, the answer is no, but we can certainly go back into our booking system and mine that data for sure.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate if you can get that and then email that out to members of council. And then to let you know, I've also been talking with Shelley as well, so I can get your contact information and we'll forward those information to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I say one more thing,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor? So to his point, to the general manager's point, more ice is always wanted and needed. But for now, my point is the allocation of the ice. And that's first and foremost. More ice is not going to solve this problem. This problem is some user groups have 300 registrants and get this much ice, a very little bit of ice, and other user groups have the same number of registrants and get a larger amount of ice. So that's the problem at this point. And that, I guess that's the point of our frustration.
Yes, I understand. And I think Councilor Laurie has a question of clarity and understanding. Go ahead, Councilor Laurie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Heather, Hannah, for the presentation. So first thing that I want to clarify is just that, there is a Spruce Grove Minor Hockey and a Stony Plain Minor Hockey,
Yep.
but there is only one ringette association, that's Spruce Grove Ringette.
Yes.
So that encompasses the entire region.
Yeah. And we understand our branding is not not good. It does say Spruce Grove Ringette, even though it does say all of the towns on our logo. But to rebrand us, that's like a $50,000 venture that we are not capable of doing
sure.
at this point.
No,
We would
and-
love to be called Parkland Ringette or Tri-Area Ringette, but the cost is huge to do that.
No, and not a problem. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't another ringette organization out there that. I just
No.
wanted to make it very clear that you are the only one for this region. And so I 100% agree with you when it comes to equality and equity in making sure that there's equal opportunity for ice time for user groups that have comparable user numbers. So I appreciate you bringing up that point. But I do have one question of clarity to administration, and this is one that concerns me. Whether it's the Tri-Leisure, whether it's Stu Barnes, they've given an allocation schedule that shows all the user groups. So it's very easy to identify what user groups have been given what amount of time. So we have a document here in front of us that shows the ice schedule for our arena that shows absolutely nothing but the specific user group.
And that's,
so
the first time that's been done.
So from an equality perspective and from an understanding perspective, so the user groups themselves can understand who is being allocated to ice, who is using the ice, and to ensure that, for lack of better terms, we're above board and everybody's aware. Why this year all of a sudden did we go to an allocation schedule being sent out to our user groups that does not show the whole allocation, only their allocation?
Good question, go ahead.
Your worship, through to Councillor Laurie, I can't answer that question for you this evening. I can look into that. I do know we're changing our booking software at this current time, and our software is not supported by the vendor. I'm not sure if that's the factor. However, as our guest has indicated, this is the first year it's happened, so I would suspect that it is something along that line versus the town of Stony Plain purposely withdrawing that information.
Okay. So can I ask, could we get a commitment that an allocation schedule with all of the user groups will be sent out to all of the user groups?
Your worship, I'll investigate that, and if it's possible, we certainly will do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and coming forward to bring these concerns to council.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Council.
Heather. Oh, sorry, did you? Sorry. I'm used to looking at a screen where I can see people. Now I'm just looking like my screen is nothing there. Go ahead, Councilor Matthews.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to know, how long have you felt this problem has been occurring for? Like how long has it been where you've been equal in terms of numbers, but very unequal with regards to the allocation of ice? And then secondly, have you presented this to us before or to administration before? And what has been the feedback to you?
Through your worship to Councillor Matties, we have presented it before. I believe it was in the 2018 year of I think it was the year of 2018. I did present before council these similar numbers, and it was more to gain more ice. It was when the city of Spruce Grove was trying to get their arena built, and we were just wanting more ice. But this has been a problem for years. It's not a new problem. We've had to, I don't want to say the word beg, but we've had to, when we have to ask Stony Plain Minor Hockey for ice and not the town of Stony Plain for ice, it gives a bad outlook on everything. So when they were told at that user group meeting in 2018 that they had to share the ice, I knew that they weren't going to share the ice. They're not going to give up any ice. No user group will give up any ice that they currently have. So the 1 hour we got, that's all we got. And we need specific hours per week. We can't get an email from them on a Monday and say, oh, we have a couple extra hours this Saturday. That doesn't help us because we need to book games and we have to give a certain allotment of our ice to the BGL, and then they book game slots into those times. So just to give us a couple extra here or a couple extra there, it's helpful, but it doesn't solve our problem.
And then if I may follow up. So then, in terms of your opinion, right now, the other group would have to reduce their hours in order to be fair because there's not enough ice time overall. Is that correct?
Right.
So, in all fairness, they just need to give some back, and they will do it less.
Yes, to be fair. And it should be based on registration numbers.
Okay.
Like if they had 500 registrants and we only had 200, then you go based on that. But when we have the same number of registrants, it should be fair. It should be, and we do get a lot of ice from TLC and we do get ice from Stu Barnes. So we're just asking for our fair share from the Glen Hall as well.
And you're paying the same? Okay.
Well, they're not the same price. None of the rinks are the same price.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I think this will be better served and for communities once we get an ICE allocator. As numbers that you're showing me does show some issues of concern. But it's also a bigger picture of how much ice time that the Spruce Grove Minor Hawk has received as well in terms of their number of registrants. Because I think because Stony Plain is not allocated any ice at Stu Barnes Arena, which the ringette is, right? Which I think that kind of compensates for the reason why Stony Plain only has a lot more ice at the Glen Hall versus
Right.
at there and none at the Stu Barnes, right? So I think as we continue to grow out the system and get a regional ICE coordinator, I think we can solve some of these problems, but definitely something that we need to look at. I've been in contact with other members of the Ring Association as well, and I'm glad that they did give you 1 hour ICE in 2018, but again, it needs to continue to change, and that's why I asked the question about how much ICE is returned, because like I said, you know, if you get a notice 3 days and say, you know, we have empty ice, well, like I said, you can't arrange a game, you can't do all that stuff. So if we get the historical data of how much ice is returned, then we can also use that as a basis going forward to planning more ice for Ringette and other user groups in our community.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
very much, Your Worship. Thank you, council members.
Thank you. And just before you go, hi Hannah, how are you? Would you like to speak into the mic just so that you know you can participate?
Good, thank you.
Right. Good to see you. Are you excited to go back to school soon?
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. All the best luck to you in your school.
thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you. Administration, and has anybody else registered to speak at the public input session? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to number 4 of our agenda, which is presentations and delegations. And today we have one presentation, and we're joined by our Protective Services, the RCMP. So, gentlemen, welcome down. It's always good to see you, Inspector Loken. And FG. And again, those mics are there for you, so if you can, again, introduce yourself to the people that are watching so that they know who you are, and then go ahead with your presentation.
Sure. I'm Inspector Mike Locken, and with me today, we have a special guest. It's the new district officer for Central Alberta District, Chief Superintendent Darcy Fleury, who just recently started. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go through my presentation first, and then give him a chance, if there's any wind left in the room, to for him to speak, and then just leave it to questions from Mayor and Council. So we did send out some stats, and the ones that were sent out previously, I think that you guys have the updated ones that covers from January to July over the last 5 years. So just got to throw on my reading glasses here. Overall, obviously there are some areas where it does appear of concern, which I will speak to. In terms of the sexual assaults, has seen a 30% increase over the last 5 years, and a 117% increase this time over last year. And in speaking with our domestic violence unit and with the other senior officers at the detachment, what we're seeing is a lot of the domestic violence calls. Just so you know, a sexual assault, it can be anything from an inappropriate touch escalated to, you know, way up here. And so, again, not to minimize what a sexual assault is, but there are varying degrees of what a sexual assault is by definition. So that stat does encompass all of those as well. And so according to our domestic violence unit, about 30% of domestic related incidents have a degree of a sexual assault component with them. And so just in speaking with the other members, what we see is, and this is only speculation, is that in the last year with COVID being a unique year, people stuck in their houses, not working from work, working from home, being in close proximity with their families, domestic violence, we have seen some rise in some areas of that, and in neighbor disputes and those kinds of things, where I've said previously in previous meetings, with COVID, people aren't themselves. It's a unique time that we're going through, and so these sexual assaults do provide somewhat of closer contact and perhaps more opportunity for these to take place. What we are doing about it as a detachment is we do have a sexual assault reviewer. It was a pilot project that was suggested to our detachment by a K Division, and so we've taken that on. We do see the value in that because Domestic violence investigations and sexual assault investigations are very important. We, have faith and trust in our members and the supervisors, but also it provides an extra level of oversight just to ensure that we're doing those properly and providing the supports that we should be. And so we do have a sexual assault reviewer position that we will be converting to a full-time established position in the detachment. It's not going to take from the watch. It's another member that we had doing another task who is retired, and we've civilianized that position. So it's not taking away from members on the street, and it is provided, like I said, extra oversight into those investigations. You'll see that assaults are up as I suggested, and then under kidnapping, hostage, and abduction, you see a 300% increase over last year. But when you look at the actual numbers, 1 versus 4. And so, again, some of those, it's not necessarily a kidnapping where you think in the movies where somebody goes and snatches a child off the street. These are cases where it's usually domestic related, where the person knows them and takes the person from one place to another without their consent. So the total person's crimes over the last 5 years have decreased by 10%, but 2020 to 2021 have increased by 13%. And I'm sure that you folks may have specific questions about the stats, so I won't dwell on them for too long, but under persons crimes, you'll see that things that are typically of interest to the public, break and enters, thefts of motor vehicles, theft over, possession of stolen property, frauds, those types of crimes are all down, with the exception of break and enters, up 2% from last year. Theft of motor vehicles are down 37%. Theft over $5,000 is 0% change from last year. Theft under is down 15%, possession of stolen property down 29%, and frauds are down 14%. Just like to say in terms of the frauds, those can be I'm sure that you guys all get them. I even get them on my work phone, that your social insurance number has been compromised, and they're trying to get information and they're trying to get money out of the person. We have done a lot of public information sessions, and we've tasked some of our new members, some of the projects that they do in going to local businesses, because some of these scam artists were asking for payment and with iTunes cards and things like that. And so local businesses have been kind of educated too, that if you have a person that may seem like they're somewhat vulnerable, or they're coming in and buying an unusual amount of these cards, to maybe question what they're buying them for. And the person may choose to answer or not. And some of these people are very good at coaching these people to not disclose information. But I think it has helped and probably has contributed to lowering of those numbers. So overall, property crime as a whole in the last 5 years is down 13%, and over last year is down 11%. And total criminal code over the last 5 years is down 5%. And on the second page, the only one that I'll really speak to, again, because I was mentioning about COVID and the unique year that it's been, over the last 5 years, our mental health calls in the town of Stony Plain have gone up 89%, and last year to this year have gone up 9%. And we are seeing additional strain on people, extra stressors that they normally wouldn't have in their lives, calls with people that we've never previously dealt with before, that just need that little extra assistance or a referral, and a lot of times that does help and solve the problem. Of course, the ones that need additional assistance are referred to the appropriate agencies. Now, under our annual performance plan, we did have 3 priorities this year, and those are crime reduction, increase in public confidence and engagement, and employee wellness. And crime reduction, I think, is an all-encompassing initiative that probably is most concerning to the public, because they want to see crime come down. So one thing that we have done is as I've said before, sometimes you have to work, and I mean, this isn't my phrase, it's an old phrase, you have to work smarter, not harder, and deal or use the resources that you have the best to your ability. And so what we've done is we do have a junior membership, but we are providing a lot of cross-training and providing a mentorship program with our plainclothes units and giving those members on the watch a chance to go in with the plainclothes unit to work with them, whether it be on just one project or whether it be for a couple months at a time. And so then they go back to the watch with that additional experience to know, have a better idea of what to do when they come across these things in their day-to-day duties. Training section in K Division essentially closed down over COVID, and so training was very limited, but in a discussion that I had with the training coordinator from K Division, a lot of their members are real go-getters and don't like to work from home, and they like to be out there in the action and doing things. And several of them had actually worked in this detachment prior to going to training section. So what we did is we brought them in to cover some of our vacancies and had our trainings, a lot of the training section working from Parkland Detachment. And so there was a kind of a two benefit for that, because we had members that had some excellent training working in the detachment, but also again that mentorship aspect of coaching and mentoring the junior members who were on the watches and providing the additional things that they might sometimes get in a 2-day course in K Division, where they were getting them in actual live scenarios on the street. We've had business checks. I'm not sure, some of you who know business owners in Stony Plain or are business owners might have received a card in the door or the back door in the middle of the night to say, we were here at your business, we checked it at this time, and it was secure. So we are continuing to do that. Lock it or lose it campaign, and again, working with the CPOs and our other partners to roll that out. And just general visibility, one of the initiatives in our annual performance plan, and I know that has been addressed by council before, the perception sometimes of the public that, especially since the detachment has moved from the town of Stony Plain into Spruce Grove, that some people have the feel that they don't see the police as often. But that is one of the initiatives, that there is one sergeant that is in charge of visibility, and he is well aware of the concerns that have been brought forward by council, and that is a requirement for members to be here and patrolling in the city, and just something to impress upon the public if you do receive those concerns is that not all our members are in marked cars. We do have the crime reduction unit that are in somewhat of a covert capacity, and they are often working on prolific offenders, the ones that hurt us the most, and they are in plain unmarked vehicles. And so you might not see us, but we are there. The detachment runs 24/7. During COVID, we haven't shut down, and so we are still out there. But obviously, if there are concerns, relay them through Carl. He'll get a hold of me, and we'll do our best to alleviate those concerns or explain them. Now, I know that I'm probably taking a lot of time here, so I'll try to go a little quicker. Increasing public confidence and engagement, and that's done through various means. In the last year, we've had some online town halls with people. We've kind of seen limited success, because I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily aware that those are taking place, or they miss them, or so. I mean, they were somewhat of a benefit, but at the same time, I think they are limited sometimes in the attendance. And just with the unique year of COVID, we're having to find different ways to engage with the public, but with the restrictions lifting, and fingers crossed that we don't get the fourth wave as bad as it could happen, we will be able to go back to some of our traditional means of engaging with the public. I know this summer we have had a huge presence out on the waterways, the river, the lakes, in the boat, and engaging with the public there, because we have had a lot of drownings. We have had a lot of impaired driving complaints with boats, and the guys and girls are out there checking boats and trying to push that safety aspect as well. And then the other one, employee wellness. I won't necessarily go, just for time, I won't go into some of the initiatives that we do, but obviously a happy employee is an engaged, productive employee, so you want to keep your folks happy, and that doesn't include just the regular members, that's the support staff members as well. And there's 19 support staff that are employed by the town of Stony Plains, so that they are a part of that as well. Now, as I mentioned, I keep saying the word COVID over and over, but our service delivery has remained the same. Our front counter remains open. The one nice thing I think that we realized throughout COVID was we were given some ability to make decisions on our own as a detachment, where typically it would have to go through the bureaucracy of the chain of command to make these changes. And we were given, well, you would know, we were given the latitude to make these decisions and to improve processes without engaging in those steps. And so I think now as an organization, what's happening is they are looking at these best practices and what's working in some detachments, and what we've done in our detachment has been adopted by a lot of other detachments, as well as in terms of the service delivery from the front counter and various electronic means of doing things instead of in person, just to limit people's attendance in the detachment. And then the last thing that I'll speak to is perceptions. You know, I look at social media, and I'm sure that you guys as councillors get a lot of feedback from the public as well. Oftentimes that's fueled by what's social media. If there are concerns, again, forward them to us through Carl. But I would say 95% of the time we are able to provide a more accurate depiction of what occurred rather than what was posted in the online forum. Or in some cases, legitimately, we have areas where we could improve, and obviously, if that did happen, rather than somebody being upset with us, I would like to see us try and make it right. And so, if there are concerns, continue to forward them through Carl, and we will address that. So, as I said, I'd turn it over to Chief Superintendent Fleury if he has some words as well.
Maybe I'll just quickly go through again, because I know you may have some questions for him over the local service. But thanks again, once again, just for the invite. I know we did about a month ago, we did our video sort of first introduction, and I thought it was great, an opportunity to come down and have a chat in person and meet the rest of your staff and the other councillors, just to let you know who I am. I am the new district commander for the Central Alberta District. So I've been there 3 months now. From the last time we met was only 2, so starting to learn things and get a handle on how things are going in this district. Really, my job is just to help the commanders make sure they have everything they need in order to make the best service possible for the communities, and kind of oversee, give them some advice when need be, and that type of thing. And it was really good for me to come out and just hear Mike's presentation, so that you have it there and you know what's going on, and we get a good feel for what's happening here. And if there's any questions to him, I can see how it's going and that type of thing. I know when we spoke last time, a couple of the big concerns were the raise, back pay and all that coming for our members, and that's it's in the works. They actually signed off on it last week, I believe. The Treasury Board signed off on it as well, so that is in place. I'm not sure when it's going to be implemented. I think within the next 90 days they start looking at the catching up on the pay, and then the retro has to be done, I believe, by early next year. So there'll be a big chunk of that coming this way. And then the other, of course, is the Alberta Police Service that they're looking at developing. So I know those are some of the concerns you had last time, and I'm not sure if that's still, if you've received any further information on that or where things are going. But yeah, so I'm just really, again, just wanted to come out and spend some time so you know who is the district office and kind of does the higher, I guess, the higher end stuff for the division if there's a concern that Mike needs to pass on to us. So that's who I am. Been around a long time.
Well, welcome. Thank you for that presentation, and thank you for your comments, Commander, and welcome to our cozy town. As you can tell, it is fairly safe out here.
Yeah.
We do have a good inspector that is in charge that's helping us. I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed over the last while is the crime reduction. I think, we can throw a lot of money at trying to stop something that's happening right now, which just allows you to just chase your tail back and forth. But if you can start preventing it and some educating, that's where the dollars are going to be saved. So we definitely appreciate the work that the inspector has done in terms of that. Okay. Members of council, any questions or comments for clarity and understanding? Okay. Councillor Loy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question. Welcome, gentlemen. It's always good to see you. Just one question. We have the statistics from 2017 to now. Are you still using the same reporting system that you used in 2017 into 2021? Because if the systems do change, and they do, it can skew up the numbers as well.
Absolutely. The system itself, PROS, police reporting in a current system, is the same. It's the same software that we've had since 2005. But you're right in the sense that there are new categories that are added sometimes, and they might take away from other stats, and then you might see a 1,000% increase in something, but that's only because it's a new category. So there are the constants like assaults, break and enters, and things like that have been there for a very long time, but there are some that will appear to be really high or really low, but that's because it no longer exists or because it is new to the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, and that's probably some of the answers about having NA on the percentage changed.
Sorry?
When there's, I noticed that there's a few that says NA for percentage change. That's probably because of the new category that was added.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Meyer, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'll just start by saying thank you for your presentation, Inspector Loken, and I would just like to address that I got myself into a bit of a pickle last time you came in because I wanted to thank you for having to walk such a tight rope in regards to the Grace Life congregation. So that statement still stands. I appreciate you guys are in a tough spot, but what I didn't appreciate is what it had to come down to. I think that's a very unfortunate set of circumstances. So I'll just say it publicly this time and avoid having any awkward situations later. But that's not my question. My question tonight is, well, let's just start at the beginning. 80 years ago, World War II started, and many young men went off to war. And before they left behind their unborn children, kicking off a baby boom. 80 years on, we're now in a situation where we have to live under COVID restrictions, ostensibly to protect the integrity of our healthcare system. So, knowing that we are just getting into the peak of the baby boomers aging and becoming seniors, I'm curious if you think that in the future there will be other justifications that would see the suspension of personal freedoms.
Okay, thank you for the question. If you had told me 2 years ago that we would be in the state that we were with COVID, and that businesses would be closed down, that we wouldn't be able to travel, that we would be confined to our houses, I would have, it would have seemed somewhat incredible because it was very hard to imagine. So for me to speculate anything that's in the future, I mean, I've said in my career in the RCMP now, nothing surprises me, although it would be very unfortunate. Obviously, I wouldn't like to see that. The reality of it is, though, is that the RCMP and policing in general is the pointy end of the stick, and we are the ones that enforce the rules decided upon by our elected officials at various levels, and so we typically don't have a lot of input into what those rules are. Obviously, we do have discretion on enforcing those rules, but sometimes the level of discretion is somewhat limited to us as well.
So I appreciate your answer. Unfortunately, it's not incredible anymore. I agree. if you'd said 2 years ago this was going to be the situation we're in, I agree, but we're not in that situation anymore. And I appreciate, yes, you are the pointy end of the stick, and there is a certain amount of having to do your duty. And that's what I earlier had said. I appreciate that you guys have to walk a line here. But because we're not in this incredulous situation anymore, this is a reality that we face. This is not a discussion that we can avoid. In the future, I mean, point blank, are you prepared to live in a world where we continue to suspend people's freedoms over medical reasons?
Well,
I don't know.
Because I don't think it's unforeseeable for something like this to occur again, and on a regular basis, especially as I say, seniors begin to age.
I don't really know if we're in a position to answer that question. Really, we don't make the decisions. How those decisions are made and the political flavor of the day, I guess, and the intent of what the measures are is for public safety. And so we go out and we do our best to ensure public safety and follow the guidelines that are out there in the current of the day. So really, we're not really in a good spot to answer that question because we don't make those decisions. We, if on an individual basis, I guess everybody has their own opinions as to how they would respond to a situation like that being prolonged over the next few years. I can tell you with the government, the federal government mandating pretty quick here, actually, talk is on all federal employees will have to be vaccinated in order to maintain their jobs. Well, that becomes an employee requirement for the RCMP, and that's something that we don't make that decision, but we have to internally decide how we're going to manage that and have our people aware of the situation. So I really don't think we're in the best spot to answer that question because it's not our decision.
No, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you bringing up the fact that it's an individual choice that each of us should be allowed to make. And so I do hope that you guys do consider the long-term effects. And I hope that this discussion helped you guys consider what actually is occurring when you do that kind of work. Thank you for your time.
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I agree. Hopefully that, we as a society and our provincial and federal governments has learned how to deal with a pandemic more into the future, as this is the first one that we've seen in our generation. So as the inspector and the commander mentioned, we're not at the position to make those calls and decisions. The RCMP is just, as they said, that they're the pointy end of the stick. They're tasked to do a job, and that's what they're doing. It's I think they put a lot of their own beliefs aside because they're here to represent the people and work for the province and for the country. And if that's what's mandated and directed, then that's what they will do. Thank you, Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, gentlemen, for your report this evening. Couple of questions. The first is just a matter of clarity on your report. And so in respect to the roadside suspensions for alcohol, it was zeros across the board up to 2021, and now it's showing 12. And I'm just wondering if that's one of the things for categories, that it's a new category, or is that something that's more as a result of now the mandatory breathalyzers for traffic stops?
No, we did have mandatory alcohol screening implemented in December of, I think it was 18. And we did have some great success with that. Now there are new provincial sanctions that are arguably sometimes more effective. And so a lot of the impaired driving criminal aspect, you'll see that fall, and it's going to be dealt with through the provincial sanctions imposed by the provincial government. And so we're still in the learning phase of that. We're still processing it. There are obviously growing pains, but and this is completely personal opinion, it does seem to be a more effective program that is more, it's more efficient, it's faster, and things are dealt with sooner. Something else that we've done Along with that is we've partnered with Mad Canada and initiated a program where you might see signs around the community where it says impaired driver caught here, and those signs will be going up. Obviously, if we get somebody in their driveway, we're not going to put a sign on their front lawn, but it will be in the area. So you might not see the sign at the exact location where it was, but it'll be in the proximate area where it did occur.
I have seen those signs, and actually I really appreciate the campaign, that as well as the rollover vehicle that moves from site to site. I think that's incredible messaging, and it really hits home to the community, so I can appreciate those, and appreciate that the mandatory alcohol screening is being an effective tool and is helping get impaired drivers off our roads. In our report, we see a notation of 0 fatals. However, we know that the detachment obviously deals with a significantly wider area than just the town of Stony Plain. Right. And unfortunately, in those areas, over the last several weeks here, we have seen a significant number of fatals in both traffic accidents and, as you mentioned, drownings. And so that brings me back. You talked a little bit about the mental health supports that the RCMP have, and I'm just wondering is there adequate mental health support for, especially when these significant events are occurring and on the rise? And is there anything else that the town themselves can do to support the RCMP in that?
Just in answer to your final question, I think I appreciate the offer, but I think that we are good in that regard. From the time that I joined, and from the time that Sir joined, before I did, things have progressed. Like, nothing is perfect, and obviously we're still in a stage of improving things. And in the time that you were in as well, Bruce, like, it used to be that you would go to something that was, very traumatic, and you would either just go home to your spouse or alone, and a lot of people would choose not to share it with them because they didn't want to burden their spouse with that. Or you get together with your coworkers and spin the top off the bottle, and that was your therapy. And in some regards that did help, because it was in the sense that it was a debrief, and it was very informal and maybe not the right way. But where it did become problematic is when some people would dive into that a little further, and that became their crutch of dealing with things. And alcoholism with some was an issue. I can tell you with the programs that we have in place now, and there is a special unit in K Division that does deal with that. I was just in contact with them today over an unfortunate incident that was particularly gruesome here that the Watch dealt with not too long ago. And so we are setting up a formal debrief with the Watch to deal with that. And then there are, through our benefits, there is counseling available for people that need that extra boost. And obviously it's the job of a supervisor to watch your people, just to make sure that, and your coworkers as well, because, and then also we have a spouse group as well in the detachment that we formed a couple of years ago. And so I do have meetings with them, and I say, like, we have them for half the time. You spouses have them for the rest of the time. But obviously, if there's anything that we can do to help you, but you're our eyes and ears at home, and if you have any concerns of what's happening. So I think that we do have a lot of supports in place. The issue is sometimes, and this isn't with all members, but we are changing the stigma of coming forward and seeking help and having people go for these supports. But typically in policing, you have that macho attitude that I can deal with this on my own, and I don't need those extra supports. But that attitude is changing over time, and so people are taking advantage of the supports, and I think things are getting a lot better than they used to be.
And I appreciate that, and your worship, if I may. So that leads me into the next part of the question that I have, is so recently the provincial government has changed the way that they support victim services and the amount of funding and how the funding is directed. When I look at your report, I see significant increases in things like spousal abuse, where victim services would play a key role. So can you give us a little bit of a perspective from your side as to how you are seeing the changes in victim services impacting the supports that victims of a crime are receiving when that occurs?
At this point, there's not a lot of change. On the other hand, in our domestic violence unit, we do have an employee that is funded through local community groups that she does provide a lot of supports for victims of domestic violence. And then our victim services, we really rely on them heavily to do some great work for us. A lot of the detachments that I worked in previously had no victim services, and so that was our job as well, because as a human being, you didn't want to just leave that person to fester and be upset. And so you would be often tasked with completing the investigation and doing your role as a police officer. But another part of being a police officer is being a compassionate human being and helping those people. And so you would be, trying to get resources for them. And sometimes in a small town, that could be local clergy, that could be social workers, that could be yourself, that could be, a number of different things. So I do absolutely see the value in victim services, and without going into, funding and criticism of funding being cut by governments, without going into that, I can say that there is a definite benefit to victim services and the long-lasting effects that that agency provides to victims in helping them move forward.
Excellent, thank you, and I hope you keep us abreast of any potential changes, because I have absolutely no problem criticizing them for cutting funding on that. So just one more, if I may, Your Worship. You mentioned some of the challenges that COVID put in front of us, and obviously that was a huge one. And one of those is in the way that criminal record checks are processed. And now, having a little bit of personal experience, heard the RCMP require an original documentation, or at least our detachment requires an original documentation instead of a digital document or a photocopy, etc., as well as it requires an in-person submission. Whereas the City of Edmonton, right down the road, has an online portal access for submitting. It doesn't have to be original documents, so on and so forth. So given the fact that we have such a great group of community groups in this region who many of the coaches, volunteers, etc., require criminal record checks, is the RCMP working on something somewhat more of a streamlined process that will also leave the front counter open for more of the, I guess you would call it, higher need files and those type of things? Is there something in the works to help streamline that process?
Yeah, absolutely, and we are, and part of our online criminal record check is that you still have to pick it up in person, and you would have to provide the original ID when you pick it up, but not at the time that you're applying for it. Just without criticizing other means, having worked in the ICE unit, the Internet Child Exploitation Unit, and with local groups, particularly volunteers for children groups, whether it be hockey, Boy Scouts, whatever, I know that those groups do attract, and I'm not criticizing the volunteers, there's great volunteers that go there, but some people of that persuasion are attracted to those groups because it does provide them the opportunity to have access to kids. I know that the process and the number of checks and the number of databases that the RCMP does have access to and check is far superior to some of the other options that are available. And so I would hate to think that a community group would go with another option that would miss something potentially. And so that would be my concern. I know that a couple of years ago it came up as an issue with a private kind of group that was a lot of local clubs were going to, because you could pay it, you could get it really fast. We have changed the process in the detachment as well to expedite that. Like September is usually a very busy month for criminal record checks because then team sports, schools, like all these volunteer programs are starting up again. But what we used to do is it would just be a week turnaround minimum, and we had a person assigned. What we're doing now is when that comes in, they do the quick check, and if there's absolutely nothing, you can get it back fairly quickly. If there is some extra digging that they have to do, then it gets referred to the second level, and it might take a little longer. And sometimes if you have say a common name like Jack Jones with a common birth date of somebody else who has a criminal record this long, there are extra steps that we'll have to take to verify that's that other person and not you. So we are absolutely looking at that. That is one of the areas is criminal record checks to streamline and do better, because I mean, we look at other agencies doing those things. We just don't want to compromise the quality of what we're turning out.
Excellent, appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you much. Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Worship, I have two questions this evening. The first is with regards to an article I read in the Edmonton Journal today that we had the worst opioid overdose in 20 years in the month of May, and there was 122 people who died from drug poisoning, and 119 of those were opioid overdoses. And if you just compare that to COVID-19 and how many people died over a month, there's like one. And so it's a significant problem. They talk about, the drugs in terms of being laced with fentanyl and fentanyl analogs and those types of things. But my question is, I mean, there's a lot of people running around trying to, to mitigate the death situation here, but it's not solving the problem. And so my question is, and I know this is not your direct involvement in terms of, but it does impact everything, whether that's theft or accidents or, whatever. How, do you see this as this trend significantly increasing? And is there a significant problem in Parkland County and in our two communities here? And how do we report that to us so that we better understand what is specifically going on?
Okay. Yeah, locally, we obviously have seen some deaths. We have even recently, a couple weeks ago, I mean, it wasn't directly, the overdose didn't happen here. It happened on the streets in Edmonton, but the parent was from here and we had to do the next of kin notification. So it absolutely is having an effect. In terms of speculation on how or why it's occurring so much, I mean, obviously it is an issue. There are a lot of people that are getting access to and again, I have to be careful on how I say this, but just anecdotally, we are seeing a lot of people that are getting paid for payouts from the government that are having access to money that they haven't had before, and some of those people are spending that money on addictions, and so. But you're right, everything is tied together. Thefts, that's why when we're limited in resources, our crime reduction unit and our drug unit does keep forging ahead. We have probably fewer numbers of drug busts in the area in terms of, kind of small hits. But at the same time, our drug guys that we have in place right now, I'm very confident that they are the right people. They're, again, they are go-getters and they are people that love to work and are in that job for the right reason, and they see the big picture and they see that the bigger the dealer, the more impact it's having on society. And so this spring we did have probably the biggest drug bust that we've ever had in this detachment, one of the biggest in the province, where we had a lot of fentanyl and cocaine that was taken off the streets, and those members are still working on other things in our area. So Sir will speak to kind of the bigger picture, the global perspective, but absolutely property crime is tied to the drug activity in our area, and we are trying to do our part in taking out these dealers, and we'll never eliminate the drug problem, and it is such a huge social issue as well as just a policing issue that is taken a long time to get to the point where it has. It's going to take a long time to get out, and the problem is with addictions is you have to have a willing participant, you have to have a person that stays on track for them to go to treatment, you have to have treatment programs available, not cuts to programs, so there, when there's limited resources and things like that, it does make it difficult, but it certainly has an impact in this area, absolutely.
So on a larger global, as far as Canada is concerned, it is a priority pretty much in every province. The combating the opioid crisis right now, and it is. I just prior to coming back to Alberta, I spent 9 months in Winnipeg as the criminal operations for the federal side of the house, and so my dealing there was all in the drug, pretty much not all in the drug, but pretty much all narcotics related, and every province is feeling it. And it is a priority across the board as far as enforcement is concerned. So definitely just getting here now and seeing where our crew teams are and our general investigation units are and what they're working on, and working together with our federal people, we'll come up with some strategies and some ideas down the road. But it is a priority across the board.
I appreciate it because it needs to be a priority. There's money for COVID, but somehow it doesn't seem to be the same. And yet so many people are dying, and these are young people. These are our youth that, in so many cases. So I do really appreciate that, and I would appreciate just having, more updates on the incidents and some of the things that we're experiencing in this community.
Yeah, some of it is an awareness piece too, because a lot of there's the long-term users who are feeling the effects, but people that are getting involved with this type of drug, they don't know what they're getting into. And a lot of that, the accidental stuff and where they're going, is a real problem. So, yeah, and awareness and education is part of what we put together as a plan to kind of come up with, to combat this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Matthews. Any other members of council for questions for clear understanding?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So my next question is with regards to cannabis retail locations. So in Stony Plain, first, the provincial regulation is 100 meters from schools and education facilities. And tonight we're going to be talking about the subject. And my question is, do you think that there's any reason to have a distance greater than the 100 meters that is provided by the provincial regulation? Based on your experience, is there any issues with having it more than 100 meters from a healthcare or education facility?
Well, again, coming from Manitoba, I experienced one location where it was in the same building as a daycare. So, I mean, it was right in the same, it was here and then daycare there. And then when I was in Yellowknife, we did have drug-free zones around the schools. So I guess it kind of comes down to what the community wants, what you put out there as far as what you'll accept as a distance around certain areas that you'll allow the licensing or the people to have set up those establishments in those areas. So yeah, it kind of comes down to an individual community, what you want to do. Creating those zones if that's what you want. Then of course, it becomes, how do we enforce that down the road? I mean, even the drug-free zones that we had around the schools. Okay, so it's more of a civil sort of deal that we would put out there. There was no criminal charges towards it. It was just basically, we don't want to have this in our area. So I guess you'd have to work really towards what the rules would be around that as a community.
I guess I'm just looking to it, if there's an already significant regulation regarding cannabis, that 100 meters or a block and a quarter away from a healthcare, does it matter if it's a block and a quarter or 2 1/4 blocks? Like if the regulation is significant and or satisfactory enough that 100 meters would be sufficient?
Yeah.
That's my question.
I'm not sure I have the answer to that question. Okay. Again, I think it comes down to what the community wants. Okay. Really, I mean, the regulations are there, but so do you want it further than that? Is that what you're?
Yeah, so well, I'm saying, should it be, or is that reasonable?
Well, that goes back again probably to the individual beliefs as far as what that narcotic does to kids and what it does to influence people's, I guess, development. So I guess it'd be a tough one to answer as a, outside of you should do your own, community should do what they want to do.
Thanks.
I'll add to Councillor Matty's question because I have it written down here as well. Looking at the stats that are provided for us on page number 10 under the Cannabis Enforcement, obviously in 2019 there was one enforcement, 2020 there was one, and 2021 was two. And under the Cannabis Act, in which you guys enforced the act, in 2019 there was 3, 2020 there was 1, 2021 there was 4. So I guess the question that I think Councilor Matthews is asking is there a cannabis issue in the town of Stony Plain?
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
If you're asking if there's a cannabis issue, I would say no more prevalent than anywhere else in Alberta.
Okay. Based on the stats, it's not a huge issue for the detachment in terms of enforcement, a lot of complaints and stuff, so.
No. And then in terms of, if you want to equate cannabis with drugs, some people do, some people don't. But, our drug unit does focus on the greatest harm reduction influence that they can have, and that would be with opioids. So that's where their focus would be rather than on cannabis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question on page number 9 of the stats that was provided there. Maybe it's a clerical error, maybe there is a huge explanation for this. Under failed to comply breaches under the quarter, in 2020, there was 11. In 2021, there was 107, an 873% increase.
Sorry, where's that?
Under the page 9 of the documents that was sent to us in the agenda package.
I've just got my two-page document here, so it's
First page.
first page, and then it's failed to comply with,
The bottom.
and breaches.
Okay, so none of these numbers here that you provided me are different ones that were provided to us on our agenda package. So on our agenda package,
Yeah.
failed to comply for 2020 was 11, and then for 2021 was 107, which on your columns, it says the year-to-date update is 873%.
Is that quarter one? Oh, okay. This one, the one that I was referring to goes from January to July. This one is just the first quarter, which is January, February, March. And in terms of failed to comply and breaches, it is quite possible that when these stats were tabulated that the stats weren't, let me see.
Yes, because the previous 3 years were in that 100,
I see what
120
you're
range.
saying. Now, I don't know. I could look into that to see what the reason. But you're right. It's everyone is in the hundreds with the exception of 2020. So
Yeah, if you can look into that and just kind of, because, there's maybe this clerical error, maybe maybe in 2020, because we were in lockdown, there was, not a lot of failure to comply and breaches. I don't know, but
Right.
I'm just looking for an explanation because I know our residents see this agenda. So if they're going through the numbers and looking at it, they're like,
I'll look
Mayor
into
Choi,
that and
there's an
see if I can
873%
find,
increase. What's
an-
going on here?
an explanation for that, because I can say that when I look at fail to comply and breaches, under the January to July, which is a longer period of time, it's 6 months versus 3, the 2020 stat would be 200 breaches for that period of time, whereas it was in 2017, 215, 2018, 301, 2019, 340, 2020, 200, and 2021 is 290. So it is less than this year at that time, but judging by these numbers, with that being somewhat of a lower number, there were somewhat, even though, like I said, we did provide service delivery, there were some changes in practices that we would typically do, and if we were doing curfew checks and going to people's houses and things like that, those might have been somewhat limited in 2020 because of limited contact with people and the encouragement to stay away from that. I mean, there were fewer people being put into custody and more being released on conditions. But the numbers that I have for over the longer period of time are slightly less, but they're not the drop that are on this one here.
Okay, and I appreciate
But
that.
I'll look
that
into
email.
it.
Thank you. Councilor Fletcher?
Just looking, yes, thank you. Just looking at the two sheets, we have one that you've provided for us, which is August 4 stats. The one that we have on our computer is from July 6. So the stats on our sheets that we have in front of us are substantially different than the stats that we see on the sheets that we have from you tonight. So I'm just wondering if that's just a possible error.
I did send
Yes.
these stats earlier today, the ones that I'm referring to. I was away for 2 weeks, and the person, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but he sent Carl the wrong stats, and not that they're inaccurate, just that they covered like a really small window of time. So I don't know if that's the explanation, but I'll definitely look into that number to see why the disparity.
And thank you very much, and I thank Councilor Fletcher for mentioning that, because this is on the sheet that was provided for our council and for our agenda was Q1. So we would expect at least have Q1 and Q2, because now we're definitely past Q2, right? And the stats that are provided here tonight from you is from January to July, which is 7 months. So definitely you have the Q1 and Q2 numbers all together.
And typically what I provide is month of the presentation from the beginning of the year, whereas a quarterly report only provides a snapshot of 3 months. And so I think that a longer time frame gives a more accurate depiction of a true reflection of what's going on.
Thank you. Any questions and comments from members of council? A question regarding the, on page 10, where it talks about the Mental Health Act. As we can see on the sheet that's provided for us in our agenda package, there seems to be a consistent amount of mental health issues in our community that the RCMP is dealing with. In terms of, how can the Town of Plain help to reduce that number? As Town of Plain is very proactive in looking at things of community development and kind of supports that help our community to reduce the mental stress and the mental kind of illness that's in our community, so that there is those supports. In terms of community development through an RCMP lens, what is an advice, or how should we build our community so that we can reduce the mental health strains on our community?
Right. In terms of reducing the mental health strains, people much smarter than me would have the answer to that. Like, I honestly don't know. Like I said, this last year has been a trying year, probably for everybody in this room, just with the changes that they've had to adapt to and the additional burdens. And there are people, people deal with stress in different ways. So we have seen a greater demand for mental health services. And I think one of the downfalls, or I should say two of the downfalls, is a lot of times mental health is lacking in terms of funding and resources available to people. That's not necessarily a policing issue, but it is absolutely something that we end up dealing with when people reach their breaking point. And then the other aspect is public education on what resources are available to them, because there are a lot of people that aren't aware that when we do make those referrals, they had no idea that those services were available to them, or that they were of no cost to them as well.
One of the things that we've seen over the last few years that's very, very beneficial is the community mobilization piece. So we're talking about the enforcement stats themselves, and you see the amount of time that we're spending working with people who are going through mental health crisis. A lot of times it's left up to the police in many communities to go and manage the situation, get them to the services where they need to be, have them examined by a doctor and determine if they need to be, if they're safe enough to go to the hospital or come with us to cells. So community mobilization is basically getting your agencies collected with the RCMP or with whoever, and have them come along, so that rather than it becoming an enforcement piece, you have the mental health worker there, they go ahead and deal with the person, and perhaps they become a client and get them out of that stream. And maybe throughout that process, you kind of take them away out of the system, and they become, they get better that way. And that it goes with corrections has been involved with that, education, all these different agencies involved, so that you have all of them at the table. They assess the person who's under crisis, rather than having it always be a police situation, and then they would find the right agency to go out and manage that person's situation and make sure that they're getting the services they need. That's something I would strongly recommend. And I can get some information more for you if you like.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I have one more just kind of question and comment. Definitely, Inspector, you've been in the chambers quite a few times, and one of your biggest kind of asks for us is to make sure that when we talk to residents and they have issues, is to report anything. Because we do have a criminal analyst that will kind of track everything, and then from there we can decide if it's something serious, something we can catch, and we can also kind of plot out where they might strike next to capture the people that are doing the break-in enters and all that stuff. So my question is how is that, I think there's a new app or website designed to help kind of generate that information, and I think it's called Light Catch. How is that going?
That's, it's as an organization, I'll just speak my personal piece, is that Light Catch is not associated to the RCMP. It's a personal app that people put on, and just to simplify it in its simplest term, it's basically like Crime Watch on an app, and it allows people to what used to be the old fan-out system, where it would be my job to call 3 people on the list, and it would be their job to call 3 people, and you'd fan out this information. It's available, especially what we're seeing with younger people, and the decline in interest in some of our Crime Watch groups. It's a means of putting information out there, in real time. They have the ability to upload pictures. They have the ability to upload videos, information, just to say, be on the lookout for this, or this is suspicious activity. And again, like I said, as an organization, it's not part of the RCMP, but we have seen some successes come from it. So another initiative that we're doing right now is called the Capture System, and it's a voluntary, and we'll be doing some media on this once we get it. We're just working the bugs out of the program itself, but it's a website, a registry where people can register if they have video cameras, doorbell cameras, surveillance cameras around their house or business, and they can. It's a voluntary registration that they would register with us, and if something happens in that area, we can immediately access this. All the locations aren't available to all the general public, just to the administrator or the people that would have those rights. And it doesn't give the police access to your cameras and to look into your cameras whenever you want. It is simply a database that tells the police there's this many cameras registered in this area, and this is what they look at in case something happens that we really, like say there's an abduction, and we want to find information really quickly as to determining more information on a specific vehicle. We have the ability to go into this program, find out who has video cameras, and the old school means of doing door-to-doors and talking to neighbors and asking them if they have a video camera or saw anything. That'll still take place, but this allows a more efficient means of getting that information quickly. And so it's still up to the person whether or not they provide that information to the police when they come knocking on their door saying, we understand that you registered your video camera, do you mind if, can you have a look? But it's something else that's available. So there are a number of online means that are absolutely helping us, yeah.
Thank you very much. Members of Council, any questions? No. Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. On behalf of our council and our residents, thank you much for the protection that you provide us and our communities. As you mentioned, the Downtown Business Association, when you was coming down to checking all the doors, I did receive a note on my door coming through. I do have a business in Town Stony Plain, and I think I posted that, and then I think somebody mentioned that my secret recipe for ginger beef sauce is safe. So thank you very much for that. So definitely appreciate your time, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Members of Council, moving on with our agenda, number 5, statutory public hearings. We have nothing registered tonight. And moving on to number 6, which is the adoption of council minutes. So for the RCMC, the RCM of July 12th, 2021, members of Council, you had a chance to review it. Councilor Loy, for you to make the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, that Town Council approved the minutes of the meeting of July 12, 2021.
Okay, thank you much. Members of Council, any errors or omissions on that? Councilor Meyer, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. That was hard to hear. But okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor to accept for information? Councilor Meyer?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to number 7, which is council boards and commissions minutes. There are none on the agenda today, so that moves us to number 8, which is bylaws. So this time, before we head into bylaws, let's take a 10-minute recess. If we can get back here at 6:34, please. Thank you. and those that are watching and participating via YouTube. Okay, I'm just double checking. We had little issues with Councillor Meyer's connection. Councillor Meyer, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to number 8 of our agenda, which is bylaws. Moving on to 8.1, which is the fire services bylaw for second and third reading. Go ahead, administration.
Present, our fire chief is present, and I will just turn it over to them to speak to council about this bylaw.
Your worship, members of council, as you're aware, first reading was given to the bylaw in June, and we brought it back in June 14th, June 28th. We brought it back for second and third reading. Council had some more questions that they would like some answers from, so we're bringing this evening second and third reading. Our fire chief, Mr. Mistel, has a quick PowerPoint to go through with you, and certainly will be available to answer questions once his presentation is complete. And the presentation will focus on the motions that council made at the last meeting.
Worship, members of council, I'll apologize first thing. I've had voice issues and losing my voice for some reason, but it's my pleasure to be here tonight to present Fire Services Bylaw 2646 PS 21 for second and third reading. So as General Manager Hill alluded to, June 14th was brought forward for first reading. On the 28th of June was for second and third, and 2 motions were brought forward by council. One was a wording, and the second one was to bring back some options, which we've done tonight. Motion 1 was Town Council amend the wording in Bylaw 2646 PS 21 3.3.1B to provide medical response services. That's been amended to providing medical response. I believe the initial was providing through a partnership with Alberta Health Services, and it's been amended to provide medical response. And the second motion was move the Town Council refer Bylaw 2646 PS 21 back to administration to bring back options in respect to the permitting of the Tier 1 fireworks and options in respect to the permitting process for recreational fire pits. So we brought both of those forward tonight. So with the fireworks, looking at all the big picture, we brought forward 2 options. Option number 1, adopt the bylaw as previously presented, with the inclusion of a permit requirement for the discharge of Tier 1 fireworks in the town of Stony Plain. And our option 2 was amend the bylaw to remove all the permit requirements for the discharge of Tier 1 fireworks. This places the onus on the end user to follow manufacturers' recommendations for the discharge of fireworks. At this time, we're recommending option number 2, remove the Tier 1 portion from the fire service bylaw. And, excuse me. With that, I mean, we would take questions at the end. We'll go through the presentation. The proposed changes does not affect the Tier 2 fireworks, so that's the big shows. So Canada Day, New Year's, that does not affect the Tier 2, only the Tier 1, the family shop grade. The second motion was to bring back options for recreational fire pits. So this, we put quite a bit of effort into this. Using Connect Explorer, the aerial views, we counted an estimate of 2,150 backyard fire pits in Stony Plain. Of those, 1,282 appear to be in compliance with measured distance, and 888 appear not to be in compliance. Again, there's a caveat with that. That's just based on measurement. We couldn't zoom in to see if, excuse me, if screens were in place and all that. It basically was just on the distance from the recommended guidelines. A little bit of background: in the last 3 years, Stony Plain Fire Department responded to about 5 recreational fire pit related incidents. All pits were within the acceptable guideline. No injuries, dollar loss, or extinguishment actions were required at the time of those. We discussed the backyard recreational fire pit. For the purpose of the rest of the presentation, we'll just say fire pit. That's kind of a long thing to say. This is the guideline we've been using to, for our residents to ensure that we're meeting the intent of what we're trying to accomplish. So basically, 3 meters, 10 feet from fences, from trees, from decks, from any combustibles. Keep away from the overhangs of trees, aerial canopies. Can't build over utilities, gas lines, power lines, things like that. Some non-combustible around it, so if a spark or log rolls out, we're not going to have an issue. And the big one is having a screen. So we've had very good success with the education, working with the planning department. This is what we've been doing. We get very few requests for inspections. We get the odd phone call, but most of the people it's pretty self-explanatory and easy to follow to be in compliance. So the two options we brought forward with recreational fire pits, number one is amend Fire Service Bylaw 2646 PS 21 to include the recreational fire pits. This will kind of shift our focus from more to more regulatory and compliance over education and working with our residents. Option two would be to not include the backyard fire pits in this bylaw and continue to work and educate with builders and residents to ensure our safe enjoyment. And at this time, we're recommending option number two. We have a low number of incidents and low number of issues with the backyard fire pits. So including in the bylaw, I don't believe it will make a huge increase to our safety of our community. So that's the motions that were brought forward at the last meeting, and we will open to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you much for the presentation, Chief Mistel and General Manager. And thank you for bringing those options back to council as those a lot of concerns and conversation around the council table. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding? Councillor Matties?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is with regards to the Tier 1 fireworks. I did a little research, and the National Safety Council said that in 2017, there was 18,500 fires per year, 1,300 structural, 300 vehicle, and 17,000 other fires. In 2017, caused 8 deaths in Canada and 12,000 injuries. They basically are suggesting that everyone should enjoy public fireworks displays and not use any at home. So I'm wondering why you are recommending option number 2 for that. I do concur with what you've said with option number 2 for the fire pits because of all of the measurements and everything else that's in place. But I don't think it's as easy to really control of fireworks, and especially with global warming and all of the increased heats we have and the dry weather, I am very concerned about that. So if you could please comment.
Thank you. Through to Councillor Matties. Yeah, there's lots of information out there, worldwide for sure. Looking at the numbers in our community, they were very, very low. We had next to no fireworks complaints, with our peace officers and responses from the fire department. So at this time, the recommendation was to remove it, but with the caveat in there that it could be reopened to be added to the bylaw anytime in the future.
May I follow up? But why would we risk fire from fireworks in an environment that's significantly changing? Right now, I mean, you see fires all across Canada, all across, the west side of the United States, and anything, a cigarette drop for just a second can all of a sudden ignite a flame. And I'm quite worried about, that maybe we do need to be considering the risk of this, because how do you provide guidelines for fireworks that keep us, everybody safe in our community?
Your Worship, through Councillor Matties, we have developed some guidelines that were in cooperation with our vendors. They've been given copies and for feedback on some safe usage. So it's not necessarily a permitting issue. It's an education tool for the purchase and the use at the time when they're picking up their fireworks. Again, the numbers just didn't warrant the huge changes at this time. But again, the takes onus in the fact that in the future, if it becomes a problem, we can reopen this and definitely make some changes to the current bylaw as presented.
Thank you, and thank you for Councilman Manis for that. So just going back to that, on the agenda is the rationale for option 2 recommendation was that the Safety Codes Act and the National Resources of Canada do not permit requirement to have a permit to purchase Tier 1 fireworks. Is that correct?
Your Worship and members of council, yes, the last version of the Alberta Fire Code had a section in there about family grade fireworks. When they switched to the national code, it was pulled out of the fire code and put into Natural Resource Canada, and the family grade disappeared. It's there, but there's no teeth as it had in the provincial code. So that's why it's basically put back to the municipality to make a decision on which direction they want to go, instead of laying it out, black and white as it once was.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm looking for a clarity first from administration. I believe in the presentation, and it wasn't very clear in our package in the way it was laid out. Do we actually require an amendment for option 2? Or is option 2 what's included? Because when I read the strike-through bylaw, the red line copy, I believe it actually had removed everything. But I believe in the presentation, and I think the way that it's written in our preamble stated that we needed to make an amendment to remove it from the bylaw. So I'm just looking for, first off, clarity on that.
Okay. I think, because I haven't accepted the second reading yet, but second reading says as amended.
Yeah, but that's what I'm seeking clarity, because when I read the copy, it's not there, but then I believe in the presentation in both our preamble, it's kind of gray on whether the amendment's been made by administration or whether council needs to make that amendment to go to option 2.
Okay. I think those, from what I understand, and maybe staff can provide clarity. So in the bylaw that is proposed before us, they've already adopted option 2 and option 2 as amended. And if we accept the motion as amended, then that's what it is on the thing. And if we choose to change it, then we can change it as a council, and then that'll be as amended based on what we change.
Perfect. Wanted to just be very clear on that before I did. So with that, no, I'll speak in favor of the changes that were made. I appreciate that that's been done. I know there was a lot of feedback, and while certainly there are justifications as to why we could put bylaws into place for certain things, sometimes it's more about education and being in front of people. And so I appreciate, it sounds like some work's already underway in respect to that. I know the work's been underway for several years for the fire pits. I'm glad to see it's underway for the fireworks. I think this is something that, we have not seen an issue in our community, and therefore I don't see why an overreaching one. I mean, you can come up with statistics for anything. We want to talk about fires started by fireworks. I mean, yeah, let's talk about fires started by cigarette butts. And so should we ban cigarettes from our community because of that? Glass bottles and refraction and what they can start for fires. So there's always going to be risk, as there is with driving your car down the road. And I think it's about understanding what the risk is and understanding the best way to avoid that risk while still allowing people to enjoy a product that exists out in the market that is perfectly legal for them to do so. So I appreciate the work that's gone in, and I look forward to seeing the educational materials that'll come out of these discussions, and hopefully that will help us avoid any potential problems in the future, but also appreciate if we do see a rise and we do see some problems, that we can open this discussion back up.
Thank you. Councilor Matthews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a comment that, you know, as we've seen, the world has changed significantly around us. And I sure hope that it's not a fire that, I mean, we've seen a whole town basically get wiped out in BC as a result of some either off of a train, sparks off of a train that lit a fire and burned the whole community down. So I think that we do need to be a whole lot more careful in this environment, and I sure hope that whatever education that we're providing better be darn good if we support not changing that to option one.
Thank you for comments, Council Matters. General Manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to supplement the Chief's previous comments, Councillor Matty's, the bylaw also has fire ban or provisions in it. So fireworks would be included under that fire ban. So if we got to a point where the community was at risk related to fire-related issues, certainly we would put a fire ban on, and that would include the discharge of fireworks. That would include fire pits that were not part of the regulatory list of fire pits. So as Councillor Laurie has also stated, fires start from a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's man-made, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's fireworks, but probably the vast majority are ATVs without spark arresters on their exhausts in the backcountry. And often municipalities like ours, it doesn't really start in our community, but it comes into our community as a result of being started somewhere else. So certainly I think you're right, the world is drier, and I'm sure if you had the golf manager in today, he'd tell you how many rain days we haven't had for substantial moisture, and we're pushing 40, almost 50 days of that type of weather. So definitely the fire chief has the ability to put a fire ban in our community if that need is there, and it's a risk that we need to take, or sorry, a measure that we need to take to mitigate that risk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'm just going to ask a question regarding the Tier 1 fireworks. As mentioned in option 1, that was originally presented to us. There were some concerns about time and ability to, be non-competitive in the retail market. Can staff provide an estimated time frame or the amount of time that our staff and maybe the retailers would have to do if we had a requirement for permitting for Tier 1 fireworks?
Worship and members of council, that's a difficult one. The kind of the permitting system we were proposing would be, we were kind of trying to focus on that 3 to 5 day turnaround at the initial inset. As the process was streamlined and we found better ways to do it, I would assume that would improve. But that was probably 3 to 5 days would be kind of the general time frame at this time. The municipality to the east of here, their turnaround time was 5 days, is what they were, 5 business days for their similar Tier 1 and Tier 2 permitting system.
Okay. Thank you. And then in the second question, so if council chooses to go with option 2, which has been recommended, and in terms of the safety of a community, I'm looking at ways of education and outreach to our residents, especially during holidays that tend to lend itself to ample firework use. July 1st, New Year's Eve, those days, a lot of our residents do shoot off fireworks, and I'm very glad to see that the numbers have indicated that there hasn't been any, very, very many issues over the last quite a few years. But is there an education or an outreach program that we're going to think about to educate our residents? So even though that there's no permit required for Tier 1, there'd be an education program to educate those that are purchasing, but also the general public.
Your Worship and members of council, yes, we've been working with our 2 vendors in our community to develop a guideline package that would be basically, handed out when you go to purchase a family grade fireworks. So little things just on weather and obvious not impaired by drugs or alcohol, just standard guidelines that we've used from CSA and other organizations that have put packages together. We kind of took what we felt was part of, would make increased safety in our community, and that's the way we worked on it. Each vendor's been given a copy for feedback, and they were both very supportive and willing to work with us and be able to start handing this out if necessary.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Manning, go ahead.
I was traveling through BC this year, and they had a 555 number presented on a number of signs on highways, et cetera, to report fires. If we needed to report a fire in this community, does everybody know what we call? Is it 911, and are we going to immediately get a quick response to fire that way? Or is there some other options we can consider in our region?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I believe 911 would be our best option. You're guaranteed somebody's going to be on the other end of the phone. We get several people that call direct to the station, whether they look in the phone book, or I don't even know if a phone book exists anymore. Yeah, we get the odd one, but we can't guarantee that there will be somebody there to answer the phone. We recommend 911, no matter what. If you're concerned that there's going to be, potential of loss of life or property, call 911. That's the easiest way.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Yeah, Your Worship, just to point out, I think the equivalent of BC's 555 in Alberta would be 310 fire. That's the Alberta wildfire number for reporting incidents, and so that would be more so what you see, and I believe it is posted out more on the rural highways, and there's many other vehicles that travel around with it on there. So we have quite a good educational campaign in Alberta for that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, see none. Councillor Plechko, if I can make a motion for second reading, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, that Town Council gives second reading to Fire Services Bylaw 2646/PS/21 as amended.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Plechko. So members of council, motion is on the floor, and it is as amended, so option two for the Tier 1 firework and option 2 for the backyard fire pits is in play. Okay, questions, comments, and debate, please. Go ahead, Councillor Laurie. Go ahead, Councillor Matties, yes, if you like.
I could ask to amend this
Yes, you
motion.
can.
I'd like to ask that we consider amending the fireworks so that we do have a permit requirement.
Okay, so administration, Councillor Matties is asking that the amendment be option 1 versus option 2 for the Tier 1 firework. Okay, I'll open the floor for questions and debate. Councillor Matties, would you like to have an opening comment?
As I've mentioned before, I think that times have changed, and if the process is quite reasonable with regards to getting a permit for an individual wanting to have fireworks at their home, then I think that way would make sure that proper protocol is in place and that it is safe to do that without unreasonable protocol. And I just feel that the world has changed and that this is a fairly high risk to our community.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions, comments, debate? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I can appreciate the amendment, but I will not be supporting it. I think we've heard statistically in the town of Stony Plain that this is not a problem, and we're not in a position right now where we foresee this becoming a problem. We've had recreational grade fireworks available in this community for many, 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 many years, and although, yes, the world as a whole is changing, as we've heard, wildfires can start in any number of ways, fireworks being one of those ways. And by putting in a bylaw to require a permit, that doesn't actually mean we're preventing it. Because the likelihood is somebody who's going to deploy fireworks against manufacturers' recommendations or in an unsafe manner is going to do so regardless of a permit or not. And so I feel that by putting a permit in place, all we were doing is probably taking a process that is quite simple for somebody who is going to be compliant and who is going to follow the manufacturer's directions, and adding in a bunch of red tape for them to jump through in order to do something that they would already do anyways. And so I don't feel that our permit is going to create any level of compliance that will actually change, prevent, or aid in lessening the probability of a problem. Could a firework start a fire? Yes. Will having a permit prevent that? No, it won't. So I don't think the permit process is required. I don't see it as actually solving any problem that we have in place today. I don't see it preventing a problem that we could foresee in the future. I appreciate the fact that this bylaw is open so that if something does start coming forward, if we do start noticing a trend, if there is something going in that direction, that we can readdress it. But, you know, same as we said with our fire pits, we could put permits in place on those too. Our residents have them, our residents enjoy them, our residents are using them responsibly. I don't see a need for us to put these permits in unnecessarily, create more administrative work, and ultimately not change anything for those who are going to comply anyways.
Okay. Thank you very much for the comments, Councillor Lori. Any other questions, comments, debate? Okay. Thank you for bringing the amendment forward, Councillor Matties. I thought about this and I will not support the amendment. I think we've heard from our fire chief that it is not quite an issue in town Stony Plain, but the door is open for us to review if it becomes an issue. I think one of the reasons why this went back was to make sure that we have a fair playing field with the other municipalities around us that are not enforcing or have a fire permit for Tier 1. I think if it becomes too cumbersome, I think, as Councillor Lori mentioned, it was just easier for me just to drive 2 minutes down to Beach Corner and buy my fireworks in Parkland County and bring it to the town Stony Plain and still fire them off. Right? The bylaw here for the permit is only for purchases and within the town Stony Plain. So how do we prevent Tier 1 fireworks coming outside our community into our community? So I think the bigger factor is the education process and not whether if we require a permit or not. Okay. Councillor Matties, would you like to close?
Certainly. I do strongly believe that we should have a permit process. I believe I understand that Spruce Grove has one as well for Tier 1. And I think that would make us more consistent in the region. I also believe that the world, as I said, has changed. We have significant risk of fire, and this is one area when you start shooting those, they can land anywhere, and it's just a much harder type of a fire to even identify and address. So I believe that we should be looking at more stringent requirements because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you much, Councillor Matties. Call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Councillor Meyer?
I'm in favor. Yes, I'm in favor.
Thank you. All those opposed? Okay, and that's 2-4, so that's defeated. The amendment is defeated. Thank you very much for bringing that forward. Okay, so we're back to the original motion by Councillor Pleshko. Any other questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Meyer?
In favor.
Thank you. Moving on to third reading. Councillor Lori, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council give third reading to Fire Services Bylaw 2646/PS/21.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of Council, we've had quite a few presentations on this, and then again, another good conversation tonight. Any other thoughts, debate before I call the question? So on behalf of Council, thank you very much for administration for taking this back and doing the research and bringing back options to Council to consider. I think the work that we requested and required of you was done and fulfilled, so thank you very much for that. Going forward, this Fire Services Bylaw does make our community safer. in many aspects to replace the old one. And I do love the fact that it's written in there that this is an open bylaw that will allow us to address any issues that do arise in the future that we may need to take a look at. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Meyer?
In favor.
Thank you much. Moving on to 8.2, LUB Cannabis Amendment. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council has probably visibly noticed, we have a bit of a different setup for staff coming back out of the virtual setting. So we will just require a minute or two here, and our manager of planning, Miles Dibble, will set himself up on the counter beside us, or the desk beside us, and we'll get moving on it.
Great. Welcome back to Chambers. Mr. Dibble.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. Our presentation here is a Cannabis Land Use Bylaw Amendment, 2651 LUO 21. So the current regulations regarding cannabis in the town of Stony Plain involve a 200-meter from schools and provincial healthcare facilities, a 100-meter from playgrounds, including other things such as skateboard parks, BMX tracks, outdoor fitness installations, and the spray park, and 150 meters from any site that has an approved permit for a cannabis retail site. This differs from the provincial regulations, where there's just a 100-meter radius around schools and provincial healthcare facilities. The bylaw that is before council is proposed to align the town standards with the provincial standards and reduce it to just 100 meters from school and provincial healthcare facilities. During previous discussions under the administrative update to the LUB that happened a couple months back, council did discuss these changes. So administration has put forth now this recommendation to basically streamline and reduce red tape to ensure that our regulations are that of other municipalities that have a similar to the provincial regulations. As part of the application, or as part of the report here, we provided a map that shows 3 different buffers pertaining to the 3 different setbacks. So the blue one shows, the blue dots are the existing or proposed cannabis retail sites in Stony Plain. Again, the ones that are kind of a light shade of pink are those that are proposed, and those in blue are existing, with a 150-meter radius around them. Education facilities and health facilities, such as the hospital, the health center, as well as schools, are shown in red, and the buffer starts at the property line. That's why they're a little bit larger. And again, this is a 200-meter buffer. The 100-meter buffer is the green buffer around play structures and other similar facilities in the town in green. So you can see there's a fairly large portion of the town that is restricted under these regulations. In terms of the 100-meter buffer, you would take the red area and reduce it by about half, or by exactly half in this case. In terms of our process for this bylaw, we're here in August here, presenting it for first reading and getting the approval to do the advertisement for the public hearing, which would take place in September, where we'd be able to elicit additional feedback from the public and any stakeholders that wish to speak. And then we would have discussion and the potential adoption with second and third reading, provided council gives those approvals. Short and sweet. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you much for the presentation. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding, please? Okay, seeing none. Councilor Matties for the motion.
The town council give first reading to bylaw 2651/LUO/21, and 2, authorize administration to proceed with a public hearing in accordance with the Municipal Government Act on September 27, 2021 for bylaw 2651/LUO/21.
Thank you very much, Councilor Matties. Members of council, questions, comments, and debate on the motion. Councilor Loy.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you to administration for bringing this back to us. We did have, I think, a fairly good debate at our previous council meeting. Pardon me, I think I got the fire chief's voice here. And like I commented at that particular time, when our bylaw did come in, we had no real understanding of what legalized cannabis, its outlets and stuff like that how it was going to impact our community. At that time, I think I also said that we erred on the side of caution and put in more stringent and strict rules and regulations. We just heard from our Inspector Loken that really, and the Chief Superintendent, that the cannabis issue is really not a problem. The problems with drugs, if you want to use that all-encompassing word, is really with the opiates. I think it's time to adopt this bylaw. If we find that we did err, it can always be brought back like any other bylaw that we have. But I think, from my opinion, that we have to give it a chance and reduce the limit. So unless I hear other stuff from my fellow councillors to change my mind, I will be supporting this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Loy. Councillor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In our last meeting that we had discussing this, one of the things that was brought up was cannabis shops and school care facilities. And I've had this posed to me several times in the last little while, so it's a curious question I'm hoping administration can answer. What are the total number of cannabis shops compared to out-of-school care facilities within our community?
Through your worship to Councillor Plechko, currently there are 5 locations that are active, 2 that have been proposed, and my understanding from our development officer is that we have 2 early child care facilities in town.
Just for clarification, we only have 2 child care facilities within our community?
In terms of those that are specifically child care facilities and not either associated with, say, a school directly or a preschool. Preschools do not actually, preschools count. It's daycare facilities that do not count. So there's a distinction between a preschool and a daycare facility. So for example, if a daycare facility just had after-school care, that wouldn't be considered a preschool per se.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And the other question that I've had on a number of occasions is, what issues have we seen with the current bylaw?
Through your worship to Councillor Plechko, I would say the number one challenge that we might have had with the current one is actually the siting of preschool facilities away from that buffer that needs to be the 150 or the 200-meter buffer away from private education or healthcare facilities. So again, because preschools count for that, when applicants have come in to look for sites and locations for those facilities, because it's a 200-meter buffer instead of the provincial 100-meter, there has been a significant number of areas, specifically commercial areas, that have not been eligible for those facilities because of the existing either approved or currently operational cannabis retail stores.
Thank you. And if I could just one last, just for a bit of, so the other question that I've had posed quite often is, by changing this bylaw today to the provincial standards, how does that affect the current businesses, both childcare and cannabis stores, from being able to get permits? So I'm looking for kind of a number-wise is what I'm looking for.
Through your worship to Councillor Palechko, I don't know if I have a specific number, but what I can say is that it does open up a fairly large number of areas in commercial areas. So specifically, the areas around the healthcare facility, Westview Healthcare Facility, a lot of the commercial areas around that are within that 200-meter radius. So that would reduce that to 100. You know, there's an area around there. Few other areas specifically around Main Street. There is the St. Matthew's School as well as another school on 52nd Avenue. So those two, again, have the 200-meter buffer around them that does highly restrict areas around the downtown core from being able to have early childcare facilities. I think I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
So just as a final comment, from what I can see, and what my belief is, I believe Stony Plain is open for business. And now is a good time for us to show our community we are truly open for business. We're not in the business of deciding who can come to town and how many can come to town. We're a community that are open for business. And I think it's important that we encourage everybody to come to our community to do business. And by making a provincial standard, which is what a lot of the other communities have gone to, it does allow us to be competitive within the region for that type of thing. So again, similar to my counselor at the far end there, Councillor Loy, I think it's important today that I sit here and listen to what my other councillors have to say. But unless I hear different, I believe that this it's time to have the bylaw change to open Stony for business.
Members of Council, I'm just going to provide caution here. This is for first reading, so if you're already kind of telepathy, yeah, I guess if you're already providing your intent of how you're going to vote on this, then that is not kosher. There is a public hearing that will happen on September 27th as per bylaw. So please keep those comments of if you're in favor or not of the bylaw to that point in time. This is to debate if we want to go to first reading of this bylaw. So I do not want to have a public hearing where it can be challenged that council was already biased before the public hearing happened. Okay. Deputy Mayor, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. In light of your most recent comments, I'll keep mine very brief. I think in the presentation we saw a significant portion of our community is restricted, and I think this is unintentionally clumping some of these businesses together, and so I have concerns on that. So I'm prepared to support this first reading and hear what our community has to say.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, I'm the same. I'm appreciative that this has actually come back to us. I know when we originally put this in place, the intention was to kind of take it a little tighter than the provincial regulations, understand how it rolled out in our community and see how it's going to impact various things. And I think we're starting to see some of those impacts, whether they be positives or negatives, is I guess yet to be determined based on the community and what we hear from them. The one thing I am interested in is I'm hoping that we do get some public comment specifically around number 2 in our bylaw, the 100 meters from playground structures, including skateboard parks, BMX, bike tracks, spray park, and outdoor fitness installations. You know, in the provincial bylaw, it only speaks to public and private education services and provincial healthcare facilities. And so, to me, a playground is very much the same as an education facility. It's one and the other. It's a place where children are designed to be, children are expected to be. So, interested to hear, hopefully some of our public is tuning in tonight, because I would love to hear some public feedback on actually removing that section from it. I'm not necessarily interested in entertaining a difference in distance on it. And to me, the 150 between retail sales, again, you know, that's really a non-issue to me. And so, again, very, very interested in hearing our community's thoughts and feedback on this. Glad now that things have opened up a bit. Hopefully we should be able to have a proper public hearing, and we should be able to have people attend, and hopefully that'll bring them out. So appreciate this coming back, and looking forward to the discussion that will ensue because of that.
Go ahead, Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Your Worship. I took the opportunity to take a look at what other communities had for setbacks for the cannabis retail relative to education and provincial healthcare facilities. Cochrane was 150 meters, St. Albert was 150 meters, then otherwise 100 meters separation outside of schools. Banff was 100 meters from healthcare facility or schools. Camrose was 100 meters from schools and health facilities. Chestermere was 150 meters from schools and health facilities, and 50 meters from library, skate park, bike park, and other cannabis locations. Okotoks was 100 meters from school and health facilities. So I do feel that I would be supportive of going to first reading on that, as well as I've also talked to a business owner in the community that is not cannabis retail, who was very supportive of moving to the 100-meter based on that he felt that there was sufficient restrictions already in place for cannabis retail that would provide the protections that are required.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Any other questions and comments and debate from members of council? Okay. See none. Maybe just a question for administration. I see that there was 2 maps provided in the agenda, and both maps are identical. So why would not one map be of the altered one for the suggestions of removing the restrictions from 200 to back to 100 and removing the 100-meter buffer from playground structures, so that council and our residents can have a view of it here instead of having 2 identical maps?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. Very noted, and I think we'll add an additional map to show that. The reasons why you see the 2 maps shown here is one was an attachment by itself, and the other one was actually part of the slide deck for the presentation. So that's the reason. Thank you.
Okay. So will the map be ready for the public hearing so that our residents that do come forward to speak can see the differences?
It will be.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments before I call the question on first reading and public hearing? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Okay. Thank you, and that is carried. Moving on to business items. Number 9 on the agenda is 9.1 is the RCMP quarterly update. We already had the presentation. So Deputy Mayor, I'm going to ask you to make the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That the council accept the quarterly RCMP presentation for information.
Okay, thank you much, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to call the question. There's no representatives here for us to ask any questions for clarity and understanding, so I'm just going to call the question. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Thank you.
Sorry, in favor?
Thank you, and that is carried. Moving on to 9.2, the commercial industrial multi-unit residential infill policy. Go ahead, administration.
See, we have a staff member just settling in, so might just take a minute or two to do so.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to all of council for the opportunity to speak this evening. Also great to see everybody in person again. The town's commercial, industrial, and multi-unit residential infill policy is due for formal review in 2021. The policy intends to encourage property owners to invest in development that will further revitalize the established commercial, industrial, and multi-unit residential areas through financial incentives and non-financial support. As part of the review process, the Growth and Commerce Committee was engaged at various meetings earlier this year. The intent of the GCC review was to identify amendments to the policy that would encourage infill development. Consequently, economic development identified through stakeholder engagement and discussions with the town's planning and infrastructure department that a tiered security framework would support the developer industry. The framework would enable a risk-managed approach to new investment opportunities by easing security requirements for developers who meet a set of performance requirements. The framework was presented and well received by the GCC, which the committee then recommended economic development to incorporate a similar framework. As a result, the Planning and Infrastructure Department is drafting a standalone policy considering all the requirements of development agreements while still offering developers the benefit of the economic development initially intended to stimulate infill projects. Various projects over the years have been supported through the incentives that exist in the current policy. Most notably, Tim Hortons, Railway Plaza, the Summit Center, and Cooperators Insurance. In front of you is a real commercial development project that was supported through this infill policy. You'll note 2017 assessed value was $750,000. In 2018, conversations began with the developer, and it was supported through the policy to defer offsite levies and rebate the development permit. 2019, assessed value was $2.2 million, and currently in 2021, the assessed value of that development is $3.7 million. The policy has helped expedite multiple developments, allowed for developers to hit the ground running by deferring offsite levies, creating much-needed jobs for our residents, and these types of reinvestment reduce pressure on sensitive agricultural and environmental lands on the periphery of the town. The majority of the changes to the policy are to provide clarity and align the policy with structure and formatting best practice. Additionally, the deferral of offsite levies has been removed to reflect policy changes undertaken by the Planning and Infrastructure Department. All changes are reflected in a red line version, which is attached for Council's reference. Administration recommends that Council adopts policy CAO 052 as presented. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members of Council, any questions of clarity and understanding from the presentation? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, my question is more in regards to the actual policy, not the presentation, but I'll ask it anyhow. Sorry, I'm just having just a touch of a moment bringing it up. Under 5.0 incentives, 5.1.2 and 5.1.3, when it says consider adjustments, and then I go down, excuse me, to roles and responsibilities, 7.2.2, to recommend to council policy incentives that may be offered to applicant, sorry, maybe it's the next one, to approve agreements with applicant property owners approved to represent. Sorry, anyhow, the basis of my question is, up in the first half, under the 5.0 incentives, does the word consider mean that the CAO is obliged to bring, for example, parking variances or setback variances to council?
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration, in terms of considerations and the responsibility of staff to bring back things that we want to change or alter in the development process, back to council.
Your Worship, and to all of council, I think I understand pretty well what Councillor Meyer was, or Deputy Mayor was asking there. So The policy and the incentives within the policy leave some room so that, you know, because every scenario is a little different, and a lot of these developments get treated on a case-by-case basis. And so in my time, I haven't utilized some of them, which would be, say, the parking requirement aspects. But I can appreciate that they're in there to leave some room and to allow some room for recommendation to the CAO, you know, based on what some of the best practice might be, or what the best needs would be for the community, and then also understanding maybe some of the future projects the town might have going that could work in conjunction with some of these developments. So I hope that that's answering the question, based on Councillor Meyer's ask.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor, the quick answer is yes, staff have the ability to consider it, but that's only consideration based on the land use bylaw that Town Council has already approved. So any variances that are minor can be approved by administrative staff in terms of the plan department, but anything considerable in terms of parking adjustments that require a reduction of, for example, 10 or 20%, has to come back to council for approval, because council has originally approved that bylaw, and the council is the only people that are able to change and alter that bylaw in a significant manner. So in terms of buildings within town Stony Plain, a good example of that recent history is the Three Robins project. There was a parking requirement that came back to council, and then council made the motion to accept those reductions. So therefore, it was not accepted by the town manager or staff. It was accepted and adopted by town council.
Oh, okay, good. That's what I was worried about. I thought we might be setting up administration for the sort of the blamed party if something were not satisfactory to our residents. I'd like the ultimate decision still reside with council, that we can take that responsibility. And so that's what I understand is occurring. The Three Robins is a great example of how I think it ought to work. And so if that's how it's going to continue, I'm comfortable.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing that and raising that concern. Councilor Matthews?
If I may, just a quick comment there, and I think, excuse me, the other notion regarding parking, again, you mean infill projects, you know, the essential idea is that an infill project will oftentimes have perhaps a bit more of a challenging path. You know, they tend to be in built areas. There's historical construction around them, so on and so forth. And from time to time, I do recall, you know, even going back to when the original policy was drafted, that we did get, you know, parking requests, parking comments, and so on and so forth. And the intent there is to ensure that, you know, I mean, in this case, the economic development staff, the proponent of the project, has the understanding, has the notion that, you know, there's potential for flexibility on parking in some of these infill projects. And that was the general thinking or the general notion around that area. But again, just to confirm, you know, I mean, there's specific requirements that have to be met or not, and there's a process for those.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Go on to Councilor Matthews. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is with regards to page 76 of 131, where you were so kind to provide examples of how these incentives have been successful in the past. And you said all of these projects utilize the deferral of off-site levies, and yet we're taking off-site levies deferral out of our recommendations today. And I was just wondering if you could give us an example of how they worked in the past, and then explain, so I remember, why they're now being taken out. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Your Worship, to Councillor Matties, it's I mean, it's a good catch. I mean, it is one of the more substantial pieces to the update, but it's not going away. It's going to be living on its standalone policy. So planning and infrastructure is prepared as standalone policy that will be the betterment of the development community in general. And this will be something that that can now be utilized for all developments within the municipality, as opposed to segregated in just the infill policy. So that's the intention there. So it's still something that can be utilized. It's something to be utilized for all developments.
Oh, then may I ask then, so why wouldn't it also be named in here?
Your worship,
Or
to
referred
Councillor
to.
Matties. I think the struggle with it was that only because it wasn't being kind of segregated as an incentive, being that it is something that can be utilized for all land development. It was tough to acknowledge it specifically as an incentive in this. So it'll still be a piece that's utilized in any conversations with the land development industry and within any of our investment attraction material, things like that. But it just didn't seem right to acknowledge it as an incentive specifically within the infill policy for that reason.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, see none. We'll go start with Councillor Laurie with the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that Town Council adopt C-CAO-52 Commercial, Industrial, Multi-Unit Residential Policy as presented, and repeal C-CAO-023 Commercial, Industrial, and Multi-Unit Residential Policy.
Okay, thank you much. Members of Council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some general comment. As one of the sitting members of the GCC, I appreciate all the conversation and all the work that went into the redevelopment of this policy. And, you know, we've seen some success stories as to where it's already worked. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to see success with this policy throughout the town, especially now moving the development levies into their own policy as a standalone. The two policies will complement each other very well, and I believe it will be a good thing for our entire town in getting our infill up and moving a little bit more than it is already.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, and debate? Okay. Seeing none, before I ask and call the question again, thank you for the members of the GCC. Again, this has been a topic of conversation for many times. How do we get infill and developments within the areas of town Stony Plain that have already built up? And this is a good example from our administrative staff to present some of those examples to see how that worked. And looking forward to having this cleaned up, updated, and then having the offset levies available to other developers, not just the people that were kind of highlighted in the infill policy. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor?
In favor?
Okay. Thank you. And let's move on to number 9.3 is the 2021 second quarter report. Go ahead, administration.
So in front of council and in the package in advance of the meeting, our quarterly report. Your worship, again, there's a fair amount of information in there, both for council's benefit and also for the public's benefit. Not going to go into a bunch of detail on our presentation, certainly able to answer any questions council may have or you know, any clarifications thereof.
Okay. Members of council, we've seen the report. Any questions and comments on that? Councillor Plechko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Very good in-depth report. I do have a bit of a concern on page 100 of 131. As I walked around West Terra not that long ago, towards the park and the arena that's there where the new development's going, you make reference to inspections, repairs were completed, 30 visual inspections and 72 playground inspections. Since the beginning of this summer, that park has been partially boarded up and ropes tied around everything. In fact, I'm told by many of the residents there that that park has not been usable at all this season. And I'm just wondering what we can do to make that park fit within what I read in the report.
Go ahead, General Manager.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Palatchko. So that is the inspections were what caused it to be closed. So the comment in here is accurate. So it was inspected and closed because it was unsafe. The floor material at that location has been ripped apart and damaged. And we're looking at options right now on how to repair that safely so that the slides and the apparatus above it can be safely used by residents. So it's been temporarily boarded up. As you know, it's a spongy material on the ground there, and it peels apart, and a small little hole becomes a giant hole, which is what's happened. So we're working with the supplier on how do we patch that, how do we bring that back into a safe condition.
So thank you for that answer. So the next question that's been posed to me by many of the residents around there is, it's a well-known fact that that park is a hangout for many of the schools that are around there that are easy access. And many of the residents around there have brought that to the attention of town, or they feel they've brought it to the attention of town with little to no response. And I'm wondering how we can work with the schools to keep the people that are coming to that park from destroying the park. I'm just wondering, one of the questions that I was asked was, is it the town's responsibility or is it the school's responsibility to know where those students are during school hours?
Can you help me with this one?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Palatchko. It's a challenging question because that assumes that the kids from the school are causing the damage. I think that's a difficult assumption because I believe it could be someone in the middle of the night that the residents aren't aware of. So certainly we do encourage school groups to use our facilities from time to time. They certainly use our sport fields, our arena amenity, our pool amenity, and definitely if they're of the age where they can utilize a playground because their school doesn't have one, then we would certainly encourage or welcome that. If we're seeing, and it's quite visible and clear that that group is damaging that particular piece of equipment, then certainly we would have that conversation with the school to see what options exist.
Is now joining.
We would see what options exist to mitigate that damage reasonably between the two of us.
If I may comment a bit further on that, Your Worship, and I'm going to maybe just, I'll try to be brief, but maybe just a bit of a leeway on, and I understand, I don't know the extent, but I understand there has been some vandalism at that particular park, or the rec facility or the playground that we're talking about. And the one thing, a question as to what can be done about that, or how do we work on that, or what have you. I know going back 5-7 years ago, there was a bit of an uptick in graffiti within the community. And one of the things is it's sort of like when the RCMP was here, like,
We'll just take a little break here.
One of the things that is important is that it's reported, that it's, the time, the so on and so forth. It's a bit of a, the community has a place to play as well. And again, it's always difficult, not asking, individuals within a community to be deputized, but, during any sort of vandalism or what have you, if it's happening during the day and if it can be done in a safe manner, that's something that members of the community can note or even, have something to say to the individuals that are doing it. So, I guess my point being is that, there are steps you have to, be aware of when, how, and put a bit of a focus in it. And if it's one or two parks in a certain area, that focus probably can be done. I understand. I'm just understanding the conversation as it's being had right now. If it's school-aged or school whatever, well, that's, starting up in September. We typically have pretty good working relationships with the schools, and we can have some of those conversations. So, but again, when you brought that up, I thought back to some of the graffiti challenges we were having 5, 6, 7 years ago. And, for all intents and purposes, Stony Plain is a pretty clean community when it comes to graffiti. We typically get it reported quick. Our staff get out, get it cleaned up pretty quick and all that sort of stuff. So not a hard answer, but just some commentary. So thanks for your indulgence, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Any other questions regarding that, Councillor Manning? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I just wanted to make a comment that I liked that I saw the Stony Plain transit statistics increased from May till June. So that's good. So people are using our transit, and that's increasing. I wouldn't mind hearing some feedback about that tonight. And then also the Stony Plain outdoor pool, wondering if the weather remains good. Does it stay open longer? I can't recall. It would be great if it could. And then just my last comment is I just wanted to say how wonderful it was to hear about all the youth programs in the community. And so that was really great. So just an overall excellent report.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. Staff, anything to report on pool operations time and transit ridership and feedback we've heard from residents or users?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, I'll start with the pool. We could certainly have the conversation with the TLC. Typically, it's about staffing and our ability to keep staffing to run a little longer. Definitely, we're having unseasonable conditions right now in terms of temperatures. If that does extend into the later part of the year, then we can certainly have that conversation and provide an extra amount of time for people at the pool. So again, it would be staffing and weather for sure. My understanding with the transit, and a quick answer would be restrictions were starting to be lifted in terms of people going back into their office environments and traveling a bit more. So the numbers certainly have started to increase since the restrictions with COVID-19 have started to be reduced. So we anticipate that trend will continue, and we anticipate that there might be another spike in September when people downtown start working back in the downtown core of Edmonton and start utilizing the transit system.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions of clarity, understanding, and comments to administration? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I appreciate the detail that's in the report that we receive. It's fantastic. I was going to comment about the transit numbers, and Councillor Matties did, so no need to. But I did have one question just in regards to transit. You did mention September, and I thought you were going to talk about students and UPass, but you talked about downtown. So I just want to make sure, do we have any type of advertising going through the educational institutions to ensure that students who would potentially take transit from the Stony Plain area are aware of the transit system that Stony Plain has now and its integration with UPass?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, I don't have the definitive answer. I could ask our manager that question. In some of the conversation that we've been having recently, it's not only the university students, there are some students that go to high schools in Spruce Grove too. So certainly that's some commentary and some consideration that they're starting to give with respect to our transit system. And we do anticipate that we'll have high school kids starting to use that. So there is some chatter about different demographics going between our two communities, not necessarily between our two communities to connect into the greater Edmonton metro region.
Thank you. And my question around UPass more so revolves, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do we not receive a portion of revenue from UPass based on the amount of ridership?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie. I don't believe that we get a portion ourselves directly, but through our cost-sharing arrangements and revenue-sharing arrangements with the City of Spruce Grove, any revenue which comes back to the commuter system, which they operate, through the UPass membership process, we would benefit from.
So the data though does drive that number. So the number of riders does drive the revenue that's received through that commuter system. So then, therefore, advertising that in Stony Plain, that we now have that connection extended into Stony Plain, could potentially increase the revenue received through the commuter system by putting more students into that transportation network, correct?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie, I think I should, before I say yes to that, let's get the correct information, and I believe the intention is what you said, but let's find out through the process, and we'll get back to council on that.
For sure, appreciate it. And with September quickly approaching, I don't even know the council necessarily needs to be briefed if that is the case, if we can make sure that through the UPass system, it is communicated out to those students so they understand the opportunity is there.
Thank you. Moving on to Deputy Mayor. Just give us a minute, Deputy Mayor. We're just having some technical issues. Okay, Deputy Mayor, we'll come back to you. Just give the staff a couple minutes. Councillor Matties?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is regarding a resident, and this is related to the signing strategy. I wrote down page 94, but somehow I lost it. So anyways, it's regarding the signage strategy. Mr. Don Smith, he had some road concerns in July, and then he asked me another question, which was with regards to would the town consider replacing the town map and the church directory that was previously on the 5th Meridian. And I don't recall that map, but I'm wondering, with aging population, many seniors not having phones or phones that can find maps and things like that, would it be feasible to put a map, for example, at Rotary Park, and maybe a sign that says there is a map for somebody to reference?
Okay. Thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor Matties. And yes, on Highway 779 coming into Stony Plain, just right off the over-ramp, there was a little kind of a slip out or kind of a little bob out where there's an area for people to pull over to look at a map of town Stony Plain, and it was sponsored by I believe the Rotary clubs and the chamber and the churches. Going to have all the churches. I think that was removed in terms of safety for the road expansion, and that map has now been replaced with the digital sign. So definitely, and then we were trying to drive everybody to Rotary Park, as that is the new visitor information center. Right. So definitely having a consideration of having a map that somebody can look at there is actually a good idea. So that's something that our staff can have that conversation, and even when we have our next meeting with the chamber, we can bring that up as well.
Wonderful. I will let him know. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to try to go back to Deputy Mayor. Hopefully this works. Deputy Mayor?
here. I'm not sure if we've lost connection with Deputy Mayor Meyer. I think we need to clarify for sure if it's if we've lost a connection or if he's just unable to mic in or what have you. But just even for you know, purposes of the minutes and voting and whatnot, I think we need to make sure we've got confirmation on
Is
that.
now exiting.
Okay. And we'll just wait to see if it reconnects.
They want time.
I apologize. Eric?
Is now joining.
Welcome back, Deputy Mayor. We apologize. I don't know what happened there, but we kind of lost you there for a bit, and we had a little extra sound from you, and then we lost you again, so I'm glad you're back.
I'm sorry, I started the meeting in a library and now I've moved to a restaurant. So anyhow, if I could go ahead with my question.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's just in regard to page 92, the Edmonton Global Site Selection submission. I'm glad to see we're finally getting some leads from Edmonton Global. I'm curious, A, is this our first lead, or B, if it's not, if in future reports we could have maybe some type of count, some tally of that.
Okay, thank you. Administrative staff that put together the update.
So it's not the first site selection proposal, and certainly we can ensure that the information and the data is tracked through our quarterly reports going forward to acknowledge you know, the tracking of that as well.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, anything else?
No, thank you.
Right, any other questions or comments regarding the quarterly report that is in our package? Okay, seeing none. Councilor Plechko for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the 2021 second quarter report for information.
Okay, thank you very much. Any debate on accepting it for information? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to 9.4, governance and priorities meeting cancellation. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, Your Worship, as we forecast or look into the upcoming sort of 6 to 8 weeks, we don't see as many agenda items coming into the council chambers over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. We feel that we can probably get those scheduled into the regular council meetings that are on the schedule. So we just brought this in front of council with that information, and if council sees fit to cancel these 2 GNP meetings, we would schedule things into the regular meetings, and certainly it's at council's discretion to do so. So I'll stop there, Your Worship. Can answer any quick questions council may have, but that's the basics.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And comments from members of council, any questions and comments? So I'm just going to double check with the town manager. Said usually we get presentations and user groups that come to the government's priorities, and also allows council to have a look at some bylaws and such before it comes to a regular council meeting. You just mentioned that we're able to fit those into the regular council meetings that are scheduled.
Yes, Your Worship. We would just be, anything that came up, we would just schedule within those regular meetings, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have just a bit of general comment. I'm not too opposed to the September 7th one, as that's shortly upcoming, and if there's not very many items, then I'm not too worried about that. I do have a little bit of reservation with already going all the way out and canceling October's, because we do have the opportunity for, as we heard, more things to potentially come forward between now and then. As well as, I hate to say it, but we do have a tendency to run rather long on our meetings, so I'm a little concerned about adding additional agenda items in that may detract from other agenda items that do require a little bit more time and are a little bit more of our attention. So I'm quite supportive of the canceling the Tuesday, September 7th one if there is very minimal items for the agenda at this point in time. But I think I'd prefer to withhold canceling the October 4th one until our September 27th council meeting to be sure that we do not have an agenda items for that meeting. I think it'd be easier than canceling it and adding more items to the agenda or potentially having to bring that meeting back.
Thank you. And as the Municipal Government Act states that council by resolution can cancel meetings, and all we need is at least 24 hours notice. So hearing those comments, we can definitely support canceling the September GMP and then have the October 4th GMP cancellation come back later in September if that's still warranted that there's no agenda items that are on there. Is that okay with members of council? Councilor Matthews?
We'd be able to have a couple of weeks' notice, though, just so that we can plan our schedules accordingly if that's the case, as opposed to 2 days before.
Yes. So definitely would be the meeting that to council the October 4th would be in the first meeting in September, so September 16th.
Yeah, Your Worship, appreciate that comment. And yeah, sometimes as council's seen probably over the course of the last 4 years and even going back a bit further, there would be the odd time where we would cancel a meeting on very short notice. So that was part of the intent of just bringing this into the chambers and just having council have some understanding and comment about it. So, you know, we can certainly gauge the agenda processes and be, I think you said September 16th?
Yeah, it is September 13th. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that would be just fine.
Yeah, and you know, provide an update or a perspective at that point as to what we see coming into the chambers over the next few meetings. So,
Well, thank you. And yes, from today's date till September 13th is roughly another month. So that gives us an opportunity if more things do arise, we can keep that, or at that time we can cancel it so that, as Councilor Matty's mentioned, that we can plan around that instead of having it canceled within 4 days or 5 days of the next meeting. Okay. Thank you. So members of council, Deputy Mayor, did you hear the conversation? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I heard the conversation. I do have a comment, if I could.
Go ahead.
I'm just concerned with the limited amount of opportunity the public has had to participate in public meetings over the last year and a half. I find it, well, with the startup of school in September, as well as the many community groups that will be starting up, I was hoping maybe that would be an opportunity that we could spotlight some of these groups. So I don't think I'll be supporting this item.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Okay. So I'm going to ask Councillor Loy if you can make the motion, please. Just the first part of the motion, please.
Yes, Your Worship, that town council September 7, 2021, council priority meetings.
Is now exiting.
For sure. Thank you very much. And with that, any conversation and debate on the motion? I think that it's a good compromise and good thing for bringing that forward, Councilor Laurie, and making that suggestion. Go ahead, Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a quick question to Councillor Meyer's point there. At this point in time, have we had anybody express interest in attending the September 7th council meeting, GMP meeting? Any user groups, any residents, etc.?
Thank you, Your Worship.
I apologize.
Is now joining.
I don't believe so. I was just double checking. Yeah. So the answer is no.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments, debate on this? Okay. And thank you for that question, Councillor Laurie. I will support the motion, as it was just asked that if we had any user groups or any presentations for September 7th, and the answer is no. So having the meeting there, just to have a meeting in place with no agenda items does not make sense. So I will support this, and I do look forward to our next meeting on September 13th. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor?
Opposed.
Okay, thank you. So that now has passed. Moving on to information items, council discussion before we adjourn the meeting. Deputy Mayor, I'll start with you. Any questions, comments you want to bring to council's attention?
No, other than I had an opportunity to golf with our manager of community and protective services, and it was a lovely day golfing with the chamber on Wednesday, and I am looking forward to Farmers Day.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And yes, it was very good to be able to support the chamber, as I was the second annual golf tournament as a unified chamber. And it's good to see and network with all the businesses and community people around the Tri-region. Councillor Loy.
Your Worship, I'm really thrilled that we're back in person in chambers. We struggled through those 17, 18 months, pardon me. I think we did a very admirable job during that period of time, but you cannot replace sitting and being able to physically look at somebody, even if you have to give them that dirty, evil eye, to say, what are you thinking? But no, we do function better. I think any council will function better when we're in with our SLT and stuff like that, where we can look each other. And so I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loy. And obviously, you had fun, because they say when you're having fun, time flies. So 17 months became 17 weeks for you.
Freudian slip.
Yeah. Councillor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments. Again, I think it's important that we're back in council. I'm excited to be here. It's nice to see faces and be back at things, even though there is some technical difficulties. I'm sure that our team at the back there will get through them, and we'll be on track for what we were doing prior to COVID, and it's quite exciting. I do want to thank administration for all the effort they do, putting out notices to our communities about what's happening throughout the community, and it gives us the opportunity to share that with many people out there, and the response that we get back from that is that they're appreciative of what we do. So you know, I know you've been tucked away, hiding, and nobody's been really at the office, but you guys have done a fantastic job on that this summer, and I know our businesses and residents appreciate that, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I echo everything I've heard so far, and I have nothing else. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple things. I too appreciate the fact we're able to be back in person, as well as all the hard work that administration did over those 17, 18 months to help support us in the virtual environment. Obviously, it was new to all of us in one sense or another, and I don't think we struggled through it. I actually think we succeeded through it. I think it was a job well done by everyone, old and young, new and old. It went over very well, so kudos to you on that. And you know, again, another iteration tonight. We've spoken about the ability for councillors to be able to participate in meetings when not physically in presence. And, you know, aside from a couple of hiccups, I'm glad to see we were able to do that tonight, and we're able to continue that on into the future. Again, today was very honored to attend the Welcome Home event for Stephanie LeBay, our gold medalist goalkeeper for the Canadian women's soccer team. It was a wonderful event hosted by the TLC with the Tri-Municipal Councils in attendance. Incredibly well attended for being a daytime event when most parents are back to work, even though the kids were off for the summer, and it attracted people from all over the city of Edmonton as well. So again, great way to showcase our region, so fantastic for that. And thanks to administration for all their assistance to the TLC in making that happen. I did have two quick questions this evening. I'll ask them both, and then I will look for the answers. So the first is in regards to our upcoming Farmers Days this weekend. With no midway being on site, I'm just wondering why we've moved to continue the no parking on site and make it a park and ride environment, especially when COVID is still a little bit of a concern and transit is not necessarily something that many people are comfortable with during this time. With no midway, I'm just struggling to understand why we wouldn't have the appropriate parking available on site, so I'm looking for an answer on that. And then the second is regards to the flushing of the fire hydrants through the town. I know historically this has been a task of Public Works, but in many municipalities where they have firefighters on staff, it is actually done by the fire services crew. And I'm just wondering, with us having, I believe it's 5 floor staff firefighters now, why that's a responsibility that maybe hasn't been moved over to the fire department to free Public Works members up to do a couple of other tasks. And so if I could get some answers to those, and if they're able to be tonight, great. If they have to be by email, then I guess we can wait for that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Definitely parking and fire hydrant flushing.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie. So with respect to Farmers' Days, certainly it's, I appreciate that the gravel lot will be open. We do have a wedding happening on Saturday evening also at Heritage Park. They do require some parking for sure. We do have the park and ride, which will be turning around in that gravel area. Secondary to that, we would have to increase our security capacity in that parking lot from a loitering perspective, potentially tailgate drinking, those types of things. So I think our staff in coordination or conjunction or discussion with the Kinsman opted to just continue with the park and ride. It's a safer option for people enjoying the beer gardens and the various activities that happen at Heritage Park and getting back. It's also the standard that will be maintained again as we get the midway back into Farmers' Days. So it really keeps the same process in place versus park and ride not happening one year, happening the next year, and kind of going back and forth. So there was some contemplation, but various impacts or considerations were given to it probably is just better just to stick with the park and ride. It's consistent. Our communications are fairly consistent with that also. And it takes away a logistical component of continuing to, that the staff would have to continue to provide with parking. It's very simple now. There's a one in, one out versus now we have to maintain who's public, who's not. So I think it just really comes down to the capacity of the group and a couple other factors with respect to a wedding happening during Farmers' Days, which is going to be a bit of an interesting development also. So, and I believe, the bride's not very happy about that, but we've certainly gone to our lengths to ensure that that event with Farmers' Days happening at the same time can be conducted well and be pleasurable for both parties.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, in relation to fire hydrant flushing, I'm not aware of the history here in relation to requests for the fire department to take on that duty. I do know that there are, the utility department takes a lot of ownership for the water system and is very protective about the ensuring that the valves are left in certain conditions and that everything is operating as it's intended to be and available for the fire department when they need it. So, but I guess what I can do is I'll ask some questions and work with my counterpart here in Community and Protective Services on the answer if there's a capacity, something that can be shared or what the restrictions or how it might be implemented if at all feasible.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Councillor Laurie?
That is all for me this evening. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have a question for administration in terms of Golf Course Road. I see that has been milled. I think they were going to start paving last week and they did not. I think it was just due to the extreme temperatures. Is there a new schedule for the completion of Golf Course Road?
Your Worship, the schedule that we understand is the foaming was delayed mainly due to contractor availability challenges. So it is scheduled for this week. So I do know they are behind the schedule. Unfortunately, Wells is working on that project, on that component of this project, as well as the highway project, and so that's they do have some challenges internally trying to get the contractors to meet the needs in both areas. However, I can tell you we're doing everything we can to keep that project moving.
Thank you. Councillor Loy, you said you want to have a question regarding that?
Yes, Your Worship, and thank you. And just a part two of that, I noticed that the sign that says it's going from this point to this point, or date, is now well outdated. So if they can just make that minor change, even if they add on 2 or 3 days to allow it, just shows the people that, unless it's been corrected in the last 48 hours, but.
No, I thought you were talking about the orange construction sign, because I believe it was scheduled to start earlier and finish earlier. We started later and we're finishing later, but that hasn't been updated.
Right.
The electronic sign has been updated. But
Not the electronic sign, the
Yes.
wooden signs that are on the road. Yeah.
Yes, it was taped
Just
off for a while.
aside.
Can we have that corrected so it doesn't look like it's supposed to be completed August 2nd, and we're sitting here at August 16th and it's not completed? It was just for optics, but
Don't be so.
Correct.
picky.
We will cover up the one sign. The other one is right beside it.
you can always put 2022 on there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, just before we adjourn, again, as mentioned by Councilor Laurie, Farmers Day this weekend. It's nice to have it back, even though it's be a little bit altered and changed, but we are doing the best we can with the situations we have in terms of the COVID-19 restrictions and as well as construction in our community. There is a Mayor's and Council pancake breakfast, so make sure you come out to that. And then there's a whole bunch of other things you can do, but no amusement and no parade this year. As well, where else here? Oh, October 24th, I'd be remiss not to invite you all to come down to Shikawi Park here around 2 o'clock in partnership with the West Parkland Gas Co-op. We're going to do an ice tank dunk of your mayor. As we know, the last 17 months has been extremely difficult for many people in our community, in our region. So in terms of that, we're raising money to go towards the coordinated suicide prevention program in our communities. My goal personally is to have $5,000 raised. So I think the whole scenario is that you get to put $20 in there to a chance to pull your ticket out to throw a ball at me, to dunk me in some ice cold water. And I'm more than happy to take as many balls as possible to get to that 5,000 mark. So if you guys can come out, that is Tuesday, September 24th at the Shikawi Park at 2 p.m. As well, if you're in town on, yes? August, sorry. Yes, I have August here. I don't know why September. Sorry, my apologies. That is, maybe I didn't want you guys to come at all.
So I already bought tickets. So now, do we get to bring our own ice cubes?
No, actually, they are preparing ice cubes, and then you'll see ice cubes floating in the water.
Sounds great. And now, so that's next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday on the 24th.
And when do we find out that my ticket has been drawn?
It'll be drawn here. So, West Parkland Gas is planning to have an event involving some of our community. I'm not too sure if they contacted the youth center, but that we sent them over that way as well to make sure that this is kind of a community event to get people out. And again, it has been rough for us in terms of mental health. Suicide prevention is a big deal to me and to a lot of our residents in our community. And whatever I can do to raise some funds and awareness for that, I'm more than happy to. So, thank you. And also, Thursday, August 26th, is the second Midsummer Thursday downtown. There'll be a lot more food trucks, and we've actually come down and spread out through more of the downtown core. We've also asked businesses to participate and stay open later so that we can have bring us kind of a festival atmosphere to downtown. And August 31st is Shikawi's 100th birthday celebration. Again, that was postponed another year because of the COVID restrictions, but we are doing a virtual, so that'll be very interesting, and it'd be nice to celebrate with our sister town their 100th anniversary. Okay. And with that, also the August 27th weekend is the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce Tri-Regional Expo, and Marketplace. That's a mouthful. I think we're all scheduled to go check it out if you like. I don't believe we have a booth there. Do we have a booth this year? No. So just come and greet, and then meet with members of the chamber and look at the businesses that are throughout their community. Okay. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it was delightful to be back in chambers with everyone. As I mentioned a couple times, we've had some hiccups because I was so used to having a couple screens before me. I would have 2 iPads going, a laptop and monitor here, and my phone listening to you guys buzz me until you guys want to speak, to looking around and dealing with Councillor Meyer and saying hi to him, which is kind of interesting. Definitely appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate the ability to network with you guys, to see you guys, to interact, and thank you, administration, for the work that you provided to get the agenda packages. Before we adjourn, as you can see, there's 2 different members of our staff that are joining us today. And one is over there, and one is over there. These will be permit fixtures within our chambers, so I'd like to have them introduce themselves. Please, we'll start with Lorraine, please.
Good evening, Your Worship, and all members of council. I'm the Manager of Legislative Services, Lorraine Ellis. I joined the town November 16th, I guess it was. So it's great to be in chambers and to finally put names to faces and be a part of the council meetings in person.
Welcome. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm Lisa Gilchrist, the General Manager of Community and Social Development. I have been joining you virtually since February, but again, it's very nice to be here in chambers in person. So great to see everyone tonight. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome, and thank you. We definitely appreciate the work that you have contributed already. With that, meeting is adjourned.